Chapter 1602. Meg was stunned for a while before he realized what Irina was talking about. He frowned and asked, "Are they looking for trouble?" "No. I heard that they are visiting Chaos City on behalf of the Roth Empire, and Sean is leading them." Irina shook her head slightly. "In that case, I'm afraid it's not suitable to kill them directly." Meg pondered and said, "Now that the Night Elves have taken root in Chaos City, and have reached an agreement with Chaos City, we are now part of Chaos City. We have to consider Chaos City's standpoint when we do things. Are you no longer that carefree loner?" Irina frowned. Sean couldn't escape from the attack on that rainy night back then. If he hadn't stayed in the army, she would have taken his life long ago. Meg looked at Irina, and knew why she wanted to kill Sean. If he had the chance, he wouldn't mind sending that seemingly magnanimous first prince to his death. He gently said, "Yes, no one dared to do anything to the elves in the past. But now, the Night Elves are drifting duckweed with no one to rely on. The Wind Forest can't wait for us to capsize. If we leave Chaos City, we will be in a very difficult situation. Sooner or later, we will make those damned fellows pay the price." "All right." Irina nodded slightly, and didn't refute Meg's words. "Oh, yes. Raina's hot pot restaurant is almost done, and she needs to recruit workers. I recommended the Night Elves to her." Meg changed the topic to a more relaxed one. "If she needs 20,000 elves, I can satisfy her." Irina's lips curled up slightly. Meg pondered for a while, and said, "We need about 10 people in the kitchen, and about 20 service staff. However, they must all be magic casters with a skill." After all, it was a big restaurant that could accommodate up to 1,000 people eating at the same time, and it was separated into upper and lower floors, private rooms, and a public hall. They had to allocate service staff according to the area to deal with complicated dining situations. "Millimeter, I'll go back and talk to the guard captain. The standard of the Night Elves' F&B department is currently quite low. I want to use the hot pot restaurant as a training ground. Send a group of people over every once in a while to raise the overall standard," Irina said without hesitation. "If it's for training and learning, I'm afraid that the Night Elves will not only get carried away by just eating hot pot, but they will also get heaty easily." Meg raised his eyebrows, but he didn't question Irina's decision. At least the problem of the new hot pot restaurant's employees was solved. He helped Raina find a group of more reliable and powerful employees. "Michael said that he wants to see me, and he also asked you out. Do you want to go with me this afternoon?" Irina asked Meg. "I just met him and Roland this morning. I guess the two of them have already guessed my identity, but they didn't say anything. There are some things that can only be said with a different identity." Meg shook his head. Since he chose to hide Alex's identity, Michael and the others tacitly chose not to ask further. However, regarding the evil god, using Alex's identity would allow them to have a more in-depth and high-level discussion. "Millimeter, then I'll go and take a nap. We'll go out after you're done." Irina stretched, and her loose dress was instantly filled with her voluptuous curves. "All right, you go and rest first." Meg nodded with a smile, and left the room. The customers who didn't get to drink rum in the morning still came in the afternoon. However, everyone became much more restrained. After hearing that Mammoth's alcohol couldn't be taken out and wasn't sold separately, they didn't insist on bringing their own alcohol jugs onto the stage. The ice element mage in the morning had indeed frightened many people. "Old Sim's brand of rum, 2 glasses first. Do you have any recommended dishes here? Husband and wife lung slice? Millimeter, although the name of the dish sounds weird, give me a portion of that. What kind of alcohol is this beer? Give me a glass too. Hey, bro. You're here too. Come. Let's gather at the table and have a taste of this rum to see if it's authentic." Customers who liked alcohol quickly gathered at a few tables. Many of them were familiar with each other in the circle, and usually wouldn't come out to drink during the day. It was really because the 3 words Old Sim were too tempting and irresistible. "Brothers, I'm also a regular at Mammoth's. Let me give you a reminder. Drinking here is different from other places. You have to follow the rules. Otherwise, even a 10th tier mage will be thrown out, Carlo reminded everyone. He was a little dizzy after drinking rum at Mammis yesterday, and was pulled to the second round. He didn't control his mouth, and leaked the news that Mammis was selling 15-year-old rum that old Sim brewed personally. So evil. Is this a black shop? A lean man lowered his voice and said. Yeah, isn't drinking to relax? If we're controlled by a bunch of rules, wouldn't it be boring? Someone at the side also muttered. No, this is a restaurant that even the Castellan occasionally visits. Carlo shook his head with a smile. He flipped the menu on the table, and said, actually, Mammis rules aren't hard to accept. It's just that we have to respect each other and the staff of the restaurant. This is the behavior of a gentleman. Everyone picked up the menu on their table. There were rules listed behind it. Don't make a racket in the restaurant, don't make things difficult for the waiters for no reason. That seems to be the case. But after drinking, it's hard to speak softly. A bald man rubbed his bald head awkwardly. Hey, isn't it just drinking and not boasting? As long as the alcohol is good, we don't care about that. Another person chuckled. Spicy grilled fish, sliced pork lung in chili sauce, steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers, spicy crayfish, roast beef kebabs, and other dishes were served one after another. The rum and beer that everyone had ordered were also served together. The customers who were still not used to the food were soon immersed in the good wine and good food, and were no longer in the mood to boast. They couldn't stop eating the spicy and refreshing dishes, so there was no time for them to talk about other things. Meanwhile, the rum made everyone's eyes light up. This kind of mellow and sweet rum was a good wine that was hard to come by in Chaos City. Those who had drunk old Sim's rum before were even more surprised. They were 100% sure that this was made by old Sim, and the quality was even better than the 3-year-old rum that they had drunk before. This boss is too nice, isn't he? A 15-year-old rum, and it's a rare product personally brewed by Master Old Sim, only costs 1,000 copper coins a glass. It's so touching, a half-drunk customer said emotionally as he wiped his tears. Ding. Nice guy card +1. A notification sounded in Meg's mind. 7 good person cards have been collected. You can summon a god. Mysterious dark cuisine recipe. Do you want to exchange it now? Chapter 1603. Meg, who was busy cooking in the kitchen, was stunned when he heard the system's notification. Then, he quickly raised his eyebrows and asked, System, what the hell is this mysterious dark cuisine? What era is it now? Does the term dark cuisine still need to be explained? The system's voice carried a hint of impatience. No. Meg rolled his eyes. He never thought that there would be a day when he would be mocked by the system. Of course, he knew what dark cuisine was. However, the fact that he had summoned a dark cuisine with 7 good person cards really shocked him. Dark cuisine has always been a mudslide in the gourmet world. It has always been in a very mysterious area. This darkness may also be caused by regional differences. However, this does not affect them from occupying a place in the gourmet world and causing people to tremble in fear. The system said with some anticipation, the host's reward this time is to draw a dark cuisine recipe from the mysterious dark cuisine warehouse. Can I reject it? Meg frowned. He did not want to add things like stargazy pie and canned herring to the menu. No. What's the use of you rejecting it? Even if I want it, I won't add it to the menu. Meg curled his lips in disdain. System, host, you are challenging the system's authority. I am warning you now. All right, I'll give you a tip of $5. Stay aside quietly. Okay. The system's humble tone disappeared. Foodies from another world, let's see what kind of dark cuisine I will draw for you. Meg looked at the mysterious wheel that appeared in his mind. He rubbed his hands and clicked on the start button. The wheel spun crazily, and the names of some dishes vaguely appeared on it: fried cicada, soy milk, stargazy pie, roasted moth, canned herring. Just looking at the names of those dishes made Meg's delicate body tremble. The taste of this dark cuisine was indeed not light. Ding. Congratulations, host, you have drawn a special dark cuisine, roasted pig's eyes. As a special delicacy of Guangxi, roasted pig's eyes successfully occupied a place in the world of dark cuisine with its wild cooking style and eating method. Moreover, with a string of strong publicity, it stepped onto the path of becoming an internet celebrity. The system's voice rang out. Roasted pig's eyes. Meg fell into deep thought as he stared at the 3 shining words on the wheel. Can you roast pig's eyes too? What is a string of life? This upstart in the world of dark cuisine, if you put a skewer of pig's eyes on the grill, it wouldn't be dark cuisine anymore. That's a horror dish. Meg looked at the glittering experience bag in his mind. For the first time, he felt a sense of resistance towards the recipe experience bag. He felt that he would be baptized by the bloody and cruel contents if he opened it. All right, I'll just pretend that I didn't draw this prize. Meg was about to leave the live stream. Fellow Dayoist, please wait. The system's voice sounded. Before Meg could come back to his senses, the glittering experience bag that was floating in front of him suddenly rushed forward and collided with his head, instantly exploding into a sky full of golden stars. A huge amount of information suddenly rushed into his mind. Cleaning and marinating the bloody pig's eyes, skewering the pig's eyes one by one, making sizzling sounds on the grill, exploding pig's eyes between his teeth. Each scene gave Meg a huge impact. The amount of information was far less than the more complicated dishes in the past, but because the scene was too bloody and exciting, it took Meg a while to recover. System, fuck you. Meg couldn't help but swear. He wasn't prepared at all, and a bloody movie was smashed into his mind just like that. According to the system's rules, the host has to receive the reward after receiving it. This is not under the control of the system said innocently. Then I still want to fuck you. Meg rolled his eyes. In his previous life, as a novelty-seeking gourmet, he had tried stargazy pie, fried cicada monkey, and so on. To him, the degree of darkness was ordinary. If he came across a good fried cicada monkey, he would sit at a roadside stall and have a drink or two. However, the degree of darkness of this roasted pig's eyes was several levels higher than that of the fried cicada monkey. Whether it was the chef who had to have a strong heart to handle the large basin of pig's eyes, or whether the chef could bear the feeling of putting the scalding pig's eyes into his mouth and then biting the eyeballs until they burst, it was also a test of the diner. After watching it, Meg felt that the Great Apocalypse Dominator didn't seem to be that big of a deal. If pigs can grow so many eyes, wouldn't they be the perfect provider of pig's eyes? Meg thought of the stone statue in the stone box. The octopus tentacles were full of eyes. The system hasn't found a wild Great Apocalypse Dominator. Consider extracting the multi-eye gene to genetically modify the wild boar that provides the eyeballs to increase the efficiency of the whole pig, the system said in agreement. Forget it. Meg pursed his lips. He didn't want to bother with the system. He had already received the experience bag. After this baptism, his fear of eyeballs had basically disappeared, and his trypophobia was cured. Ding. The host has drawn the special dark cuisine, roasted pig's eyes, and triggered a hidden mission. Please make the roasted pig's eyes famous in Chaos City's culinary world within a week. The target is to sell 3,000 skewers of roasted pig's eyes. Mission reward, receive a super fusion recipe. Mission failure punishment, eat 10 pig's eyes sashimi. Just as Meg was about to leave the mental space, the system's voice sounded again. Huh. Meg's expression froze. No, what the hell is pig's eyes sashimi? Can pig's eyes be made into sashimi too? Meg felt like tearing a few systems apart to have a taste. He had heard of pig's large intestine sashimi, but was pig's eyes sashimi serious? This slash would cause the liquid to explode. Please complete the mission on time, the system said calmly. Meg put the pig's eyes sashimi aside for the time being, and asked, also, what's that super fusion recipe? Earth's gourmets are limited by the ingredients available, so the dishes they create are based on the ingredients available on Earth. However, the Norland continent has many ingredients of a higher level. After integrating the experiences of many chefs, the system has created a batch of super fusion recipes based on the ingredients unique to the Norland continent, the system replied. Sounds like dark cuisine. Meg frowned. Nonsense. As the god of cookery system, there's no system more professional than me in this aspect, the system said seriously. Hee. Chapter 1604. Boss, the fried rice is going to burn. Mia's voice appeared beside Mag's ear, pulling him back from his thoughts. The wok in his hands quickly went into stir-frying mode. Meg glanced at the fried rice in the wok that had already changed color, and thought to himself, that was close. I almost wasted the food. After putting the roasted pig's eyes and pig's eyes sashimi to the back of his mind, Meg began to focus on dealing with the busy business hours. Boss, what are you thinking about? Mia glanced at Meg with a puzzled expression. Boss was usually very focused when he was cooking, and such a situation where he was zoning out during the fried rice cooking process had never happened before. Serve the dishes. I'm a little lost in my thoughts, Meg explained to Mia with a smile as he scooped the fried rice from the wok onto a few plates. Millimeter. Mia nodded, and turned to serve the dishes to the customers with a smile. If I knew it was so easy to earn money from selling alcohol in Chaos City, Grandpa would have come earlier. Hannah put her chin on the counter and looked at the drinkers who were moved to tears as they drank the rum that cost 1,000 copper coins a glass, and muttered softly. All these years, she and her grandfather had been brewing alcohol for the chief and the nobles in the Fork tribe. Their income wasn't much, and the money that they had saved for so many years was all gone after she built a few brewing machines. But in Chaos City, a small glass of alcohol could actually be sold for 1,000 copper coins. That barrel of 15-year-old rum could hold over 1,200 glasses, so it could be sold for 1,220,000 copper coins. After doing the math seriously, Hannah suddenly regretted selling the rum to the new chief at a low price in the Fork tribe. There were hundreds of barrels of aged rum stored in the wine cellar, and there were dozens of barrels older than 15-year-old rum. If they were to be moved to Chaos City, and she actually sold all of them for 500,000 copper coins. No, I have to go draw the blueprint immediately and build the brewing machine as soon as possible. Then, in another 15 years, I will be able to wake up laughing while lying on countless oak barrels. Hannah jumped up from the chair and ran upstairs. She locked herself in the study and continued to draw. The process of turning the complicated brewing machine from a messy draft into a design with clear dimensions required complicated verification and calculations. Fortunately, the boss had taught her how to use the decimal system and calculations in addition to teaching her how to draw the machine yesterday. After he was done with this trip, Mag went upstairs to check on Hannah, who was in the study, after he saw all the drunk customers were sent into the horse-drawn carriages. Unlike yesterday, when she couldn't even hold a pencil firmly and couldn't draw straight lines, Hannah, who was bent over the table and drawing today, already showed a pretty good professional level. The sketch had already been redrawn, and the dimensions of each part were displayed on the paper in 3 views. It wasn't that Meg hadn't considered giving Hannah a professional graphics computer to let her learn CAD and Pro E, but considering the current industrial level of this world, he ultimately rejected the idea. After all, the system might not be able to complete the purchase. Back then, didn't the Chinese scientists also rely on paper and pen to create an atomic bomb? It wouldn't be so troublesome to create a brewing machine that didn't require much technology. Meg watched for a while, then quietly closed the door and left. Hannah was clearly more professional when it came to brewing. He might have a more efficient plan, but for branded alcohol, the most important thing for high profits wasn't the production, but the unique and strong taste. Normal rum could only sell for 10 copper coins a cup, while Old Sim could sell for 1,000 copper coins a cup. This was the embodiment of the brand value. Meg changed his clothes, put on the 100 transformation mask, and equipped the Tiandu sword. He left the restaurant with Irina and headed to the city lord's manor. Alex, long time no see. Michael looked at Meg and extended his right hand. Lord Michael. Meg only nodded slightly, but didn't extend his hand. Our dragon-slaying knight hasn't changed at all. Michael withdrew his hand with a smile, and didn't show any displeasure. Meg glanced at Michael without batting an eyelid. Although this city lord looked boorish, his acting was quite good. All right, let's talk about the black fog and the evil god. Irina directly interrupted everyone's hypocritical pleasantries. That's good too. This matter concerns the future of the Norland continent. We should have a good talk. Michael's smile faded, and he nodded with a solemn expression. Everyone sat down at the round table in the secret chamber, and the atmosphere started to become tense. The first person I met who was corroded by the black fog, or perhaps controlled by the devil, was Borge. After being controlled by the devil, his power had an obvious increase. Perhaps this was the reason why he sold his soul to the devil. During that period of time, there was an evil aura that tried to corrode the Tree of Life, and posed a great threat to the Tree of Life. However, it was stopped under the influence of a certain force. During the battle at the Goblin's border, I used the holy light to break Borge's black fog, and then killed him. This proved that the holy light had an obvious suppressive effect on the black fog, Irina said. So Borge was controlled by the devil, and he actually tried to corrode the Tree of Life. Michael and Roland were both shocked. They didn't receive any information about this. If the devil used a powerful force as bait, I'm afraid not many people could resist this temptation, Roland said with a grave expression. Meg continued, in the boundless sea realm, we found an island shrouded in black fog. Alfred was receiving the devil's power on that island. We found a strange stone statue there. When I looked into its eyes, my spirit was pulled into a strange space. It was an extremely huge stone palace. At the end of the stone palace, there was a skeleton sitting on the throne. The first thing he said was, "Young man, do you desire power?" The atmosphere in the secret room became even more solemn. Power was something that all the races in this world pursued. Before the environment where the strong were respected changed, not many people would be able to resist great power. I still used the holy light to break the stone statue, and the black fog was also expelled with the holy light. Normal magic has no effect on the black fog, Irina added. If only the holy light can get rid of the black fog, this is not good news. Roland frowned, and said, light element mags are rare to begin with, and those who can form the holy light are even rarer. Once the black fog erupts all over the world, I'm afraid we won't have any effective means to get rid of it. We have to find the source of the black fog as soon as possible and get rid of it, or find a better way to get rid of the black fog. If we sit and wait, we'll only see things get worse. Those fellows can live for countless years, and we don't have that much time, Meg said in a low voice. Luckily, we left one alive. Ferdinand is still in our hands. Irina's tone was much more relaxed. Chapter 1605. The conversation didn't last for too long, but Chaos City, the Night Elves, and Meg had reached an alliance agreement. After confirming the existence of the evil gods, and that they might be trying to influence and control this world, or even destroy it, Michael and Roland displayed the courage of a qualified ruler, and decided to work together with Meg and Irina to fight to eliminate the evil. Although Chaos City didn't belong to any race, it still belonged to the Norland continent. They couldn't possibly stay out of this alone. Meg and Irina naturally didn't have any doubts about that. They also realized that they couldn't stop the spread of evil with their power alone. With Chaos City as an ally, they would at least have a firm and strong backing. Don't we need to hand Ferdinand over to them? Irina asked Meg after they came out of the City Lord's castle. I'm worried that some uncontrollable accident might happen. Before the peace conference, it's more reliable to leave him in our hands. Meg shook his head. Although Ferdinand was in a coma, the black fog around him hadn't dissipated completely. It wasn't suitable to hand him over to someone else. Millimeter. Irina nodded slightly. After a while, she looked at Meg and asked, where do you think those fellows are hiding? Meg shook his head. Perhaps they're not hidden. They should be sealed in a certain place, or many places. It could be under the boundless sea, or it could also be in a certain mountain. If they're not sealed, this world should already be in a state of complete chaos. If they're sealed, doesn't that mean there really are gods in this world? Can you sense the existence of the god of life? Meg asked Irina curiously. Irina pondered for a while, and nodded. I think she should exist, but her connection with the Tree of Life isn't very close. I can only vaguely sense that there's some kind of mysterious power on the Tree of Life. It's unfathomable. We can't be sure if those so-called gods can live through the long years like the great old ones. However, if they still exist, they might be able to sense that those fellows are getting restless, and come out to patch the seal or something. The problem might be solved then, Meg said with a smile. This was probably the most optimistic situation. Patch. It's to patch up the loopholes in the seal. Oh. Do you think it's Alex who's wearing a mask, or Mr. Mac? Michael asked Roland with a smile. Roland thought for a while, and said, "His Alex, and Mr. Mac. I also think that he doesn't reject the identity of a restaurant owner. He even enjoys it," Michael said with a smile. "It's precisely because of this that he can avoid all the suspicious looks. If he didn't come into contact with us, we wouldn't even have realized that he actually transformed into a restaurant owner." Yes. Who would have thought that the dragon-slaying knight Alex, who could chop off a giant dragon's head with a sword, could actually make such delicious dishes? Even if they had a little doubt in their hearts, they would throw it away completely after tasting the food he made. Michael nodded in agreement. "Will they attack Sean?" Roland asked worriedly. With Alex and Irina together, even if Sean was accompanied by 2 great magic casters and 2 10th-tier knights, they might not be able to guarantee his safety. "Don't worry. They won't," Michael said without worry. "What? Big brother Sean is coming to Chaos City?" Vanessa looked at Abraham in surprise. She had been in Chaos City for more than a month. Although she enjoyed her hot pot and skewers every day, she still missed her family. It would be great if she could see Big brother Sean in Chaos City. Yes. Sean is in charge of leading the team to visit Chaos City this time. Abraham nodded. He looked at Vanessa with a complicated expression, and said, "After the visit, he'll bring you back." Bring me back." Vanessa's smile froze instantly. She was stunned for a while before her expression collapsed. She looked at Abraham, and asked, "Who said I'm going back?" Abraham tried to speak as gently as he could. "Look, you've been away for more than a month. His Majesty and the Queen miss you very much, so they specially sent Sean to bring you back so that they won't worry about you." "No. Although I do miss them, where am I going to eat hot pot, skewers, soy milk, and youtiao when I go back? Besides, my teeth haven't recovered yet. I want to stay by Mr. Mac's side and let him continue to treat my teeth. I'm not going anywhere. I want to eat hot pot." Vanessa shook her head like a rattledrum. Tears were already welling up in her eyes as she looked at Abraham pitifully. "Io, my little ancestor, this is not something that I can decide. Your royal father asked me to send you back last month, and I even delayed it for a month. Now that Sean is on his way, what can I do?" Abraham shrugged as he looked at Vanessa helplessly. "Oh, my little ancestor, this is not something that I can decide." Vanessa pondered for a while before saying, "Then, can I come out again after I go back?" "That will depend on His Majesty." Abraham didn't say anything. However, judging from the king's letter yesterday, Vanessa probably wouldn't have a chance to come back to Chaos City in the near future. She was able to run away from home successfully the last time because the king had tacitly allowed it. "Mph, I'm not looking forward to seeing Big brother Sean anymore." Vanessa harumphed angrily. After a while, she looked at Abraham with a smile, and said, "Uncle Abraham, let's go for hot pot tonight." "Slightly spicy?" Abraham asked. "Hee, it's all right. We'll decide when we get to the restaurant," Vanessa said with a smile. "If it's insanely spicy, I'm not going." Abraham felt his anus tighten. It couldn't take any more damage. "Your Highness, Chaos City is up ahead." A giant golden eagle glided across the sky, and a general reminded him. It said that this city is the only city in this world that can compare to Rodu. Looks like it's not an exaggeration after all. Sean looked at the giant city in the distance. The city walls were tall, and there were rows upon rows of buildings. This city that could accommodate 1 million people was indeed comparable to Rodu. "It's just a city. Our Roth Empire has tens of thousands of kilometers of territory other than Rodu. It's not something a city that's been pieced together can compare to," a general said with a disdainful look. Everyone on the giant eagle's back burst into laughter. Chaos City was indeed nothing in the face of the powerful Roth Empire. "All right, don't say things like that when we reach Chaos City," Sean said in a low voice. Xiao Yen said in a low voice as he squinted at the city in the distance. He didn't know if he would meet that person this time. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 1606. Father! Father, bad news. Jonah barged into Bowen's study in a panic, and saw Bowen sitting behind the desk with a piece of porcelain in his hands. Didn't you go to get the ruling? Why are you so panicky? Bowen looked up at Jonah with a frown. This son of his was good at everything, except that he was too young and impatient. Chief Dominic. He's been arrested. Jonah's voice was trembling. Smack. The porcelain in Bowen's hands fell to the ground, and shattered into pieces. What did you say? Bowen stood up abruptly, and raised his voice. I went to the Department of Property Rights to get the ruling, and happened to see Dominic being taken away by the Grey Temple in shackles. I hurriedly went back to the tea house, and it was sealed up by the Grey Temple again. All the people and service staff we sent there were taken away by the Grey Temple. Jonah looked at Bowen anxiously. Father, did we touch something we shouldn't have this time? It's over. Bowen slumped back into his seat weakly. His face was a little pale, and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. The Marquis family had been operating in Chaos City for many years, and Chief Dominic could be considered their family's closest high-ranking official in the City Lord's castle. They had worked closely together for many years, and each took what they needed. Now that Dominic was arrested, and the tea house was sealed up by the Grey Temple, Bowen had no choice but to link this to Bennett's incident. This time, not only would he not be able to get Bennett's share, but he might also have to cough up a lot of things. Father! What should we do now? Jonah was a little out of his wits. This sudden incident had completely messed up their plans. Bowen took a few deep breaths, and quickly regained his composure. He looked up at Jonah, and said, Go to the accounts room right now, and destroy all the accounts related to Dominic. After that, cut off all the assets that are in the Grey area or that were established with Bennett's influence from the Marquis family. The Grey Temple is handling the case. Everyone in the Marquis Manor, put down whatever you are doing and gather in the courtyard. Anyone who is negligent will be severely punished. Right at this moment, a stern voice sounded in the Marquis Manor. They're here, too fast. Bowen looked at the door, and couldn't hide his loneliness and indignation. I want the spicy soup base, 3 times the insanely spicy. Vanessa, Abraham, Lola, Randy, and the rest sat down, and immediately ordered. Abraham's face turned green, and he looked at Vanessa with a sullen expression. Can we be a little gentler, little ancestor? 3 times insanely spicy. Is this something a normal person can handle? It seems that Miss Windsor has a good appetite these days. Randy, on the other hand, had a relaxed expression. During this period of time, he often shared a table with Vanessa and the rest. His tolerance towards the insanely spicy food was far beyond that of ordinary people. No, didn't Mr. Mack say that real men have to eat insanely spicy? Vanessa looked at Abraham seriously. Uncle Abraham, I want to eat the insanely spicy. Then let's order a double hot pot. A pot within a pot. I'll just cook the smaller pot. Abraham tried to negotiate. No, double hot pot is an insult to the spicy hot pot. Vanessa rejected cruelly, and then looked at Yarbemia with a smile. Big sister MIA, we want the spicy soup base with 3 times the insanely spicy. As for the side dishes, we'll just have the usual. All right, please wait a moment. MIA nodded with a smile, and then walked to the next table. Sigh. Abraham sighed. Who did he offend? It was her father who wanted her to go back, but he was the one who was tortured. Miss, are we not waiting for young master? Laura asked softly. Didn't my brother send a letter over just now? He's not free tonight, so there's no need to wait for him. Vanessa shook her head. She didn't want to see Sean now, either. She just wanted to have another meal of spicy hot pot. Oh. Laura nodded. She glanced at Vanessa's side profile, and didn't say anything else. This period of time in Chaos City was probably the happiest period for the princess. She was able to eat food that made her happy almost every day, and most importantly, the dental disease that had plagued her for many years had been perfectly treated in Chaos City. Now that His Highness Sean had come to Chaos City, and might have to bring her back to Rodu the day after tomorrow, she definitely wouldn't be too happy. Boss, the first barrel of rum is almost sold out. MIA put 8 glasses of rum on the tray, and reminded Meg when she saw that there was less than a third left on the barrel. "We have enough in stock. Don't worry." Meg agreed with a smile. As Connie wasn't old enough to drink yet, he had basically taken away all of Hannah's stock, especially the rum that was more than 20 years old. They were all in his hands. According to the market price, this batch of rum was worth more than 1 billion copper coins. After all, any bottle of old Sims rum that was more than 50 years old could probably be auctioned at a sky-high price. However, apart from a small portion of this rum that he intended to keep for himself, he intended to use most of it as the base liquor for the new distillery. Brewing wine was a long-term investment. Without enough aged rum, it wouldn't be able to fetch a high price. Meanwhile, this batch of aged rum in Meg's hands would become the foundation of the distillery. It could allow the new distillery to go on the road quickly and get through the awkward 3 years of brewing. He didn't intend to cheat Hannah out of this sum of money. After all, this was considered a huge inheritance that her grandfather had left her. Of course, he didn't want to cash it out for her directly. After all, no one knew if she would abandon her talent in the face of such a huge sum of money and become a lazy salted fish that only knew how to eat and work. If not for the fact that he had no money, who would want to force himself to be talented? He intended to take out 10 barrels of 15-year-old rum to open up the rum market in Chaos City, and then cut off the supply for a period of time until the new distillery was built and started production, and the new rum would be officially released. The hunger marketing methods of Mr. Guer and Mr. Mi were really worth learning. Of course, Mr. Mi's methods were even better. After all, they were the only ones who could still soar despite not having any stock all year round. Meg glanced in the direction of the designated hot pot area. Vanessa and Abraham's table, but Sean wasn't there. It seemed like he should be busy at the City Lord's castle now. However, Sean was probably going to bring Vanessa back this time, right? Actually, he quite liked this little princess. She was innocent and romantic, and didn't have the princess syndrome in her words and actions. Hence, he was willing to treat her teeth. King Andre and his 2 sons weren't good people, but this daughter and that little prince were still all right. Meg wasn't an extreme person who would kill everyone with one move. Of course, if Sean came to Mammoth for a meal, he wouldn't mind recommending him to try the restaurant's latest dark cuisine. Chapter 1607. After the dinner service, Dicus came to inform Meg that the Minister of Property Rights, Dominic, had been taken away by the Grey Temple for investigation, and that both the City Lord's castle and the Grey Temple had launched an investigation on the Marquis family. Can the patriarch of the Marquis family still be released? Meg asked with a smile. The investigation is not over yet, so the results are still unclear. However, as long as the Marquis family did not directly participate in the illegal businesses, bribe the City Lord's castle officials, and take over the illegal businesses, it's enough for him to stay in there for a while, Dicus said with a smile. Just for a while? Isn't it too easy for him? The Marquis family has to pay back everything that they have gained through Dominic. I think it's enough for him to be heartbroken for a while, Dicus said. Then, he took out a document and handed it to Meg. This is the official document of the Hot Pot restaurant. It has the City Lord's seal on it. No one will come to the Hot Pot restaurant to claim sovereignty in the future. Meg opened the document and scanned through it. It was indeed Michael's seal, and it stated that the Hot Pot restaurant officially belonged to Raina. There was no doubt about it. Please thank the City Lord for upholding justice for me, Meg said to Dicus with a smile as he kept the document. Sorry for troubling you to come over so late at night. It's all right. This was an internal problem in the City Lord's castle. We should be the ones apologizing. Then, I shall not disturb Mr. Mac's rest. I'll come for breakfast tomorrow morning. Dicus said a few polite words and left. The matter has been settled. Those who tried to fight for the ownership of the Hot Pot restaurant are all in the VIP cell next door. With this document, there won't be any messy disputes in the Hot Pot restaurant later. Meg said with a smile as he walked into the restaurant with the document. He saw Raina, who had packed her things and was about to leave with MIA and the rest. Really? Raina received the document in surprise. She read it carefully, and exclaimed, "That's great. The hot pot restaurant can open as planned now." "Oh, yes. I haven't asked when you plan to open for business." "On the opening day, Mamis will be closed for the day. Everyone will be there to support her." Meg asked curiously. He had been so busy these days that he had forgotten to ask about this important matter. Rena pondered for a while, and said, "The renovation is basically complete. Phyllis has also helped me contact a batch of outstanding elves. I want to conduct an interview with them tomorrow, and choose the most suitable ones. The training period is 3 days, and I plan to officially open for business in 5 days. You sure are swift and decisive." Meg smiled and nodded. 5 days later would be Mamis' daily rest day. Rena must have considered this as well. Amy came over with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and curiously asked, "What's the name of Big Sister Rena's hot pot restaurant?" "Yeah. What's the name?" Mia and the others also looked at Rena curiously. "I want to name this hot pot restaurant Mana Hot Pot Restaurant because the hot pot restaurant was created by the boss, and the new hot pot restaurant is my inheritance and development of the hot pot restaurant." Rena covered her face. "I'm really bad at naming. I thought for a long time, and this is the only name I could think of." Meg's eyes lit up upon hearing that. He smiled, and said, "Mana Hot Pot Restaurant. I think it's pretty good. It feels like a sub-brand of Mamis, and it has a good meaning." Mia nodded, and said, "Yeah, I think it's pretty good too. It sounds very familiar, and I know it's our own hot pot restaurant." Amy asked with a smile, "What if Big Sister Phyllis opens a kebab restaurant? Can it be called Max Kebab Restaurant?" Meg nodded in agreement. He was also bad at naming. Millimeter HM. "We can keep this naming method as a backup. Then I'll use this name." Rena thought that the name she came up with would be ridiculed, but she didn't expect to receive everyone's approval. After everyone left, Meg went upstairs to wash up, and then told the 2 children a bedtime story. After he coaxed them to sleep, he ignored Irina's eyes and went back to his room. He locked the door and lay down on his bed. He took a few deep breaths and pushed open the test field for the god of cookery. "Let's have a battle of eyes." A white light flashed in front of Meg's eyes, and he came face to face with a wall full of eyeballs. The big eyeballs that were crowded together seemed to have some kind of evil glow, and it made one's hair stand on end. "Fuck. Is there something wrong with you, system?" Mag jumped back in shock. "If you want to roast pig's eyes well, then you must have a deep understanding of pig's eyes. The first step is to identify the real pig's eyes with the naked eye. Host, please find 100 pig's eyes that meet the requirements for roasting from these 10,000 eyeballs." The system's voice sounded, and it was emotionless. Meg's throat moved. Looking at the countless eyeballs in front of him, he felt his scalp go numb, and he had a headache. If he wanted to roast pig's eyes well, he had to get rid of his fear of pig's eyes. Even if he couldn't love them, he had to at least be able to keep his emotions calm when roasting them to prevent the eyeballs from exploding due to mistakes. Roasting was an art on charcoal fire. If he wanted to roast pig's eyes perfectly, his control of the heat and his understanding of each pig's eye would determine whether he could roast a satisfactory pig's eye. Standing in front of the wall of pig's eyes, Meg took a few deep breaths and began to patiently search for the real pig's eyes among the eyeballs. There should be cow's eyes, goat's eyes, and other eyeballs mixed in here. Meg could only rely on the experience in his head to determine the real pig's eyes. This was a very meticulous and long process. From the initial nausea and numbness in his scalp, Meg gradually became numb as he looked at the 10,000 eyeballs. In his eyes, these eyeballs that were originally emitting an evil glow gradually became normal and ordinary ingredients like corn and ham. His goal was to pick out the ingredients he needed from the pile of waste. Once this mentality was formed, his efficiency increased tremendously. Very quickly, he picked out 120 pig's eyes from the 10,000 eyeballs, exceeding the requirements set by the system. Ding! Following a crisp sound, the scene in front of Mag changed, and he appeared in the kitchen that he was familiar with. On the wall beside him, there was also a 365-day countdown timer. Roasted pig's eyes. Luckily, I haven't eaten this dark cuisine before. The requirements shouldn't be too strict, right? Meg muttered to himself as he took out a pot of pig's eyes from the fridge. The eyeballs that were dug out from the roots retained the muscle fibers and subcutaneous fat around the eyeballs. The bamboo skewer could not be pierced through the eyeballs directly, but through the muscles. Otherwise, the person eating the eyeballs would not be able to experience the ritualistic moment when the eyeballs burst. Chapter 1608. Skewers of pig's eyes were placed on the grill. The temperature of the fire must not be too high. Otherwise, the hot liquid might explode and splatter all over one's face. The skewers were flipped back and forth over a small fire. During the process, the skewers were brushed with various sauces and spices, patiently waiting for the eyeballs to be cooked from the inside out. The skin of the pig's eyes sizzled with oil, and the aroma gradually spread out. Seems like it's just like that. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. He casually flipped the skewers of pig's eyes in his hand and slowly moved them to the area where the fire was more intense. Poof! The sound of an eyeball exploding was heard. One of the eyeballs on the skewers suddenly exploded. The hot liquid splattered everywhere, and a part of it flew toward his face. Damn, it really explodes. Meg tilted his head and easily avoided the liquid. Poof, 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 poof. Almost at the same time, the remaining pig's eyes all exploded. Meg quickly let go of the bamboo skewers in his hand and took 2 steps back at the same time. Only then did he narrowly avoid the hot liquid that shot out in all directions after the explosion. This is probably the most dangerous dish I've ever made, right? Meg looked at the grill and the wall that were a mess because of the liquid. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly awkwardly. If this happened in a real kitchen, it would be an accident. Meg did not need to clean up. After about 5 seconds, the grill and the countertop were clean again. Looks like I still have to strictly follow the experience and standards of an expert. I shouldn't be overconfident. Meg quickly adjusted his attitude. He took a bamboo skewer and skewered another skewer of pig's eyes. With a serious expression, he stood in front of the grill and started to roast the pig's eyes again. Roasting the pig's eyes had a very strict requirement on the heat control. This made Mag, who had already mastered the technique of flipping 200 beef kebabs at the same time, a little impatient. However, after experiencing the explosion once, his impatience was suppressed very well. The beef cubes would not explode. This was an ingredient with a temper, and one had to coax it. About 20 minutes later, the pig's eyes had been roasted to a glossy brown color. They had shrunk a lot, and the slightly fat skin had been roasted until it had shrunk and was still sizzling with oil. The tempting aroma of the roasted meat had already reached their nostrils. After sprinkling some cumin and chili and flipping it twice, it was done. With a little bit of patience, it doesn't seem that difficult. Meg sized up the roasted pig's eyes in his hand. There were 4 pig's eyes on a bamboo skewer. After being roasted, the terror value of the pig's eyes plummeted. At the very least, he would not accidentally look into a pair of dead pig's eyes. However, to most people, this kind of appearance was still very impactful, especially after knowing that it was roasted pig's eyes. Many people would probably resist it. Meg looked at the roasted pig's eyes in his hand. If it wasn't for the tempting aroma of the roasted pig's eyes, and the fact that he was already used to eating pig's eyes, he wouldn't have tried this super dark cuisine. System, did I succeed? Meg asked casually. I've never tasted something like roasted pig's eyes in my previous life. There shouldn't be any standards for this dish, right? First point, counting from the top, the skin of the third pig's eye is too dry and hard. Because it has too little oil, it should be brushed with oil during the roasting process. This is a problem that an excellent chef should take the initiative to discover and solve during the cooking process. Second point, the second pig's eye was not tightly fastened. During the roasting process, the position of the second pig's eye shifted, and the entire pig's eye could not reach the standard. Carelessness will ruin the dish. Third point, the system listed all the mistakes that Meg had made during the seemingly perfect roasting process. Now that you mention it, there are indeed quite a lot of problems. Meg nodded and accepted the system's picky suggestions. If it was only to this extent, he would be able to complete the roasted pig's eyes in no time. It was all about the details. The criteria for success in roasted pig's eyes: once you bite into it, the liquid in the pig's eyes will burst out. There is no fishy smell, and it will leave a lasting aftertaste. The eyeball has a chewy texture, and the texture is touching. It is tough on the outside and tender on the inside. It is soft and juicy, and the texture is chewy. The clear lens and cornea are like brittle bones, and it brings a different kind of pleasure when chewing. The system continued to list out the criteria. Meg. Speaking of which, system, if my memory is not lost because of my transmigration, then I haven't eaten roasted pig's eyes before, right? I'm not the one who came up with this kind of ridiculous criteria, am I? Meg asked with a frown. The broader the criteria, the higher the criteria, because the system would implement them according to the highest standards. This is a proposal for a string of life, the system answered. You even copied the proposal? Meg rolled his eyes. Didn't I state where it came from? The system said confidently. Meg opened his mouth, but he was speechless. However, he quickly said, I think this proposal might be boastful. As a candidate for the god of cookery, I have the best experience in roasting. If I can't even meet the requirements of the proposal, then wouldn't it be worse than boasting? You win. Meg thought for a while, and it seemed to make some sense. Soon, he immersed himself in roasting the pig's eyes. Making delicacies that were beyond the imagination of the diners was what a chef with ambition should do. Just like a bowl of ordinary soy milk or an ordinary youtiao, in the hands of different chefs, they could also shine with different colors. What Meg wanted to do was to let the delicacies shine with the most beautiful colors in his hands. The texture is not good enough, failure. The fishy smell of the liquid in the eyeball has not been removed, failure. Failure. The number of days on the wall slowly decreased. Meg accepted failure after failure expressionlessly. His roasting technique became more and more skillful, and the pig's eyes in his hands grew from 1 skewer to 2 skewers, 3 skewers, and finally a whole bunch. For a moment, Meg felt that he had become one with the skewers in his hands and the grill below. He could feel the heat of the charcoal in the grill and feel the subtle changes in the skewers as they were being roasted. Then, he flipped the skewers at the right time and brushed the appropriate oil and sauce on them. This was a very mysterious feeling. It was as if time had slowed down, and he could control everything as he wished. Ding! Perfect roasted pig's eyes achieve. Meg placed a bunch of hungry pig's eyes on the plate in front of him. Then, he heard the system's voice. Did I succeed? Meg did not appear too surprised. Instead, he revealed a hint of surprise. He felt that this serving of roasted pig's eyes was not perfect enough. He could make the next serving better. He raised his head and looked at the countdown on the wall. 100 days had passed without him noticing. No wonder they say that it is not easy to learn how to roast meat. It is even harder to become a master. Meg sighed in his heart. The time he took to learn this roasted pig's eyes was almost the same as the time he took to learn Buddha jumps over the wall. Meg was not in a hurry to leave the test field for the god of cookery. Instead, he continued to immerse himself in roasting the pig's eyes. He wanted to make it more perfect. Chapter 1609. Early in the morning, in Abraham's house, Sean looked at the sleepy Vanessa with a doting smile, and said, Vanessa, I haven't seen you for a few months. You seem to have grown taller. Hehe, I've been eating a lot of good food here, so I've grown quickly. Vanessa went forward happily. However, she pouted when she saw Sean, and grumbled, Big brother Sean, you only came to visit me after so long. All you know is fighting. You must have forgotten that you have a younger sister. I've been busy with the war at the borders, and the orcs have been invading again and again. I really couldn't leave. Sean smiled embarrassedly. He looked at his only younger sister, and said, So, I came to visit you after the war. TSK, you were sent here by royal father. You didn't come here just to see me. Vanessa rolled her eyes. She looked at Sean warily, and said, Tell me, did royal father send you to bring me back? You ran away from home for a few months. Royal father and royal mother are very worried about you. Another reason why they sent me to Chaos City is indeed to bring you home. How can you say that I'm bringing you back? Sean nodded. He looked at Vanessa's white teeth, and was pleasantly surprised. Also, have you fixed all your teeth? Big Sister Irina and Big Sister 1111 fixed them for me. Vanessa nodded. She grinned, and showed off her teeth. Look, aren't they very neat and white? Millimeter. You look so pretty when you smile. Sean nodded with a smile. Although he was a little surprised that Irina had fixed Vanessa's teeth, he was genuinely happy. He knew that Vanessa had been depressed all these years because of her teeth. He hadn't seen her smile as radiantly as today for many years. That's not important. The important thing is that I don't want to go home now. I like Chaos City, and I want to stay here for a while longer, Vanessa said with a serious expression. She pointed at Abraham, who was drinking his morning tea, and said, with Uncle Abraham, "My little princess, don't drag me down with you. I don't have the final say in this matter," Abraham said leisurely as he took a sip of tea. "Big brother Sean." Vanessa looked at Sean eagerly. Tears were already glistening in her big eyes. "This is Imperial Father's order. I don't have the final say." Sean shook his head. He looked at the teary Vanessa, and couldn't bear to see her like this. He gently said, "The situation on the continent has been a little unstable recently, and the situation in Chaos City has also become a little complicated. Father is worried about you, so he asked me to bring you home. Furthermore, you've been out for so long, so it's about time you went back to see Father and Mother. I think Chaos City is pretty good. Everyone is very friendly, and it's not complicated at all." Vanessa pursed her lips. When she saw Sean's non-negotiable expression, her expression fell, and she said, "I'm going to Mammoth for dinner tonight. Do you want to come? I'll cancel the banquet at the City Lord's castle tonight." Sean nodded with a smile. He hadn't had a good meal with Vanessa for a long time. Furthermore, he wanted to see what kind of magic that restaurant had that made Vanessa not want to go home. "All right, then I'll wait for you tonight. You must come back early. If you're late, you won't be able to get in line," Vanessa reminded. "Line up." Sean was a little puzzled. Abraham explained with a smile, "Mammoth has too many customers. If you want to eat, you have to line up. First come, first served. If you're late, you won't be able to get in line. I'll have to trouble Uncle to book this place. I want to have a good dinner with Vanessa tonight. I don't want anyone else to be around," Sean said to Abraham. As the first prince, princess, and duke of the Roth Empire, they actually had to line up to eat at a restaurant. Furthermore, they had to share a room with other customers. That was not befitting of his status. "Although I have the money, I don't have the ability. I'm afraid even City Lord Michael might not be able to book this place." Abraham shrugged, indicating that he didn't want to try. "The owner of this restaurant has a powerful background." Sean was puzzled. It's not that he has a powerful background. He's just a little more unique. Abraham shook his head with a smile. "Do you still remember the chef who won the best royal banquet at the king's birthday banquet?" "Yes." Sean thought for a moment before nodding. Josh had relied on that chef to suppress him at the birthday banquet. And that chef actually rejected the king's invitation to join the royal kitchen. Although he was a small fry, he did leave an impression on him. This restaurant is opened by him. He's a restaurant owner who treats all customers equally. Even City Lord Michael has to line up when he comes to eat at this restaurant. "You want me to book the entire place?" Abraham shrugged with a smile. "This chap." Sean frowned. "Mr. Mac is super nice. My teeth were cured because of him. Furthermore, he even gave me toothpaste and a toothbrush, and told me how to keep my teeth clean so that I don't have to worry about them going bad again. Also, the dishes he cooks are really delicious. Spicy grilled fish, beggar's chicken, red meat, steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers, spicy crayfish, and the most delicious hot pot. He's simply a chef who's a treasure given to us by the heavens. He constantly creates delicious food for us, and subverts our imaginations time and time again. Furthermore, the rules he sets are completely on the side of the customers. Although it makes it a little inconvenient for those with special privileges, It allows those who truly love good food to have a fair chance. Vanessa looked at Sean and said with a serious face, "Big brother Sean, if you try to break Mammoth's rules, then I can only decide not to bring you to eat good food." Sean looked at Vanessa's serious face. He rarely saw such an expression on her face. It seemed that she really did like that chef and that restaurant. After a moment of hesitation, he smiled and said, "In that case, I'll come back early. I should also properly thank the chef who satisfied my sister's appetite for good food and cured her teeth." Okay. I'll wait for you." Vanessa nodded happily, and then walked straight out of the door. As she walked, she said, "Uncle, do you want to go eat soy milk and youtiao? If not, I won't wait for you." "Of course I'm going. Aren't I waiting for you?" Abraham put down his teacup anxiously, and walked to the door. He stopped at the door, and turned back to look at Sean, and said, "Sean, you must be very busy today, so we won't be entertaining you. Let's have a good drink tonight." "All right." Sean nodded in response, and couldn't help but burst into laughter at the sight of Abraham's departing figure. He took a sip of tea from his teacup before also making his way toward the door. He was indeed very busy today, and had to have a formal discussion with the people of Chaos City. Chapter 16:10. The news of the Marquis family being investigated, and the arrest of Bowen and his son caused quite a stir in Chaos City's business circle. As one of the 4 major families in Chaos City, and one of the founding families of the Aden Chamber of Commerce, the Marquis family had a fortune of hundreds of millions. Nobody expected the Marquis family to fall so suddenly. Although the gap between the Marquis family and the Dodges family had been widened by the Buffett family and the family Morton in recent years, the Marquis family was still a huge force in Chaos City. Previously, when the news of Bennett's downfall and arrest spread, many people were guessing if the Marquis family would be implicated. However, from what happened afterward, not only was the Marquis family not implicated by Bennett's matter, they even took the opportunity to take over some of Bennett's assets that were clean on the surface, and became the biggest winner. Unexpectedly, the Grey Temple's sword fell on the Marquis family's head in just a few days, and that made everyone sigh. Some people said that the Marquis family had taken advantage of Bennett's power, and also touched properties that they shouldn't have, so they were investigated. Others said that the head of the Marquis family forcefully took over Bennett's assets, and attracted the Grey Temple's attention, so they were investigated. Some even said that Bowen's son had seduced the concubine of some big shot in the Grey Temple, and that led to the tragedy. "Bowen is too greedy. I told his old man that back then. If it were me, I would rather hand the family over to that prodigal son, Bennett, than to Bowen," Ian lamented as he took a sip of tea and looked at Hill, who hadn't finished his breakfast. Hill put a small piece of bread into his mouth, chewed it carefully, and swallowed it. He picked up the white silk handkerchief beside him and carefully wiped the corner of his mouth. After confirming that there was no food residue left, he said with an indifferent expression, "That prodigal is now in prison, waiting to be damned eternally. If old Marquis had been a little more fair to him back then, such a mess wouldn't have happened," Ian lamented. "Then, I'm afraid the Marquis family is doomed. Even if Bennett replaces Bowen as the head of the Marquis family, I'm afraid he won't be an obedient family head," Hill said as he shook his head. Ian was stunned. He looked at the hill and thought about it seriously. He couldn't help but smile and say, "Of the 4 great families, my eyes are indeed the best." "I agree." Hill nodded. Ian quickly retracted his smile, and continued, "It's best that our family doesn't get involved in this matter. Since Dominic has been arrested, it seems like the city lord is determined to clean up the grey areas in Chaos City. I reckon many people will be arrested soon. I've already done a self-inspection. The problematic fellows have already been handed over to the Grey Temple. We'll deal with them as we see fit." The Hill nodded. "Very good." Ian put down his teacup and stood up with a smile. "Do you want to go feed the fish?" "No. I have to make a trip to the City Lord's castle later to meet that first prince who came from afar." The Hill shook his head. "Go ahead. I have to go fishing." Ian didn't ask any more questions, and left slowly with his hands behind his back. The Hill stood up and watched Ian leave the restaurant before walking to the door. He asked his assistant, who was following him quickly with a briefcase, "Have you found out if the Marquis family's investigation has anything to do with Mr. Meg? There's no evidence to prove that there's a definite connection between the two at the moment. However, an employee from Amy's called Raina received a shop that originally belonged to Bennett as a gift a few days ago. During this period of time, she and the Marquis family had some disputes over the ownership of the shop," the secretary replied quickly. "Employee?" The Hill frowned. "Yes. Bennett seemed to have been pestering her previously. This shop should have been given to her directly by the Grey Temple and the City Lord's castle." The secretary nodded, and continued, "If there's a need, I can investigate the reason behind it." "There's no need for that. I was also worried that Mr. Meg would be bullied by the Marquis family. Now, it seems like my worries were completely unnecessary. This matter ends here. There's no need to investigate too thoroughly." The Hill stopped him. "Yes." The secretary nodded, and began to report the next matter. Meg exited the test field for the god of cookery. When he opened his eyes, the alarm clock beside him rang almost at the same time. He was stunned for a moment before reaching out to turn off the alarm clock. After being alone for more than 100 days in a space where there was only the crackling of the charcoal fire and the sizzling of the pig's eyes on the grill, even the sound of the alarm clock had become pleasing to the ear. "Why don't I release the roasted pig's eyes today, and roast them in front of the open display window?" The corners of Meg's lips slowly curled up. Otherwise, how could he live up to his hard work of roasting the pig's eyes for more than 100 days and nights? The number of pig's eyes that he had roasted could encircle a pig farm 10 times. What a picturesque advertising slogan. Meg didn't waste too much time in bed. After slightly dispelling the discomfort from being in the test field for the god of cookery for so long, he got out of bed and took a cold shower. After changing into a clean chef's uniform, he went downstairs to prepare breakfast for everyone. As he was worried that he would scare everyone early in the morning and affect their appetite for the day, Meg resisted the urge to add the roasted pig's eyes into the luxurious breakfast set. "Father, what delicious food are you making today?" Amy was the first to come downstairs. She stood on her tiptoes at the entrance of the kitchen to look. "Soy milk, youtiao, tofu pudding, everything. Amy can eat whatever you want." Meg turned around to look at Amy, who had long silver hair and a strand of a hoj on top of her head, and said with a smile. The little girl had already changed into a white down jacket. Her round, penguin-like figure made her look very cute, but her hair was still uncombed. Due to Irina's unique hair combing skills, Meg took the initiative to take on the task of combing Amy's hair. After all, she always had her hair down and didn't have any experience in combing hair. She was usually as fierce as a tiger, and her hairstyle was like a lightning rod. Amy thought seriously for a while, then said, "Then I'll have a set of youtiao with sweet tofu pudding, and a set of black pepper steak. I want it medium well, with a little more sweet and sour tomato sauce." "Okay, let's eat together when the big sisters are here." Meg nodded with a smile. He didn't have any objections to the little girl's pairing. After all, she could come up with different ways to eat every day. During breakfast, Meg announced that he would be adding a new dish for the day. Roasted pig's eyes? Barbara, who was drinking soy milk, choked and looked at Meg in disbelief. "Are they really pig's eyes?" Mia also looked at Meg in surprise. All the girls had similar expressions. They were surprised and a little frightened. "Yes, they are roasted pig's eyes." Meg nodded with certainty. Wonderful bookhouse. Chapter 16:11. Pigs are so cute. Won't their eyes be crispy and tasty when they're roasted? Amy asked curiously. "Well, I guess so." Meg nodded with a smile. Indeed, only a true foodie could see through the surface. "Anyway, I refuse to eat this kind of weird food," Irina declared. "I refuse too." Barbara raised her hand in agreement. Just hearing the name of the dish was enough to make her scalp tingle, let alone trying roasted eyes. "I don't dare to eat it either," Anna said softly. I also." Jane raised her hand weakly, looking weak, helpless, and pitiful. At that moment, other than Amy and Raina, The rest of the people actually expressed that they were not willing to try this dish. Just the name alone made them feel uncomfortable. Raina, are you willing to try it? Meg looked at Raina. She was the only one who sat there quietly and did not express her opinion. Raina looked at Meg with anticipation. Although she was fearful of the unknown roasted pig's eyes, there were bound to be people who were willing to sacrifice and try it on the road to the birth of delicacies. Obviously, the boss needed such people now. After hesitating for a while, she nodded firmly. I can try it. It's okay, you don't have to force yourself. I will officially launch this dish tonight. Let the customers make their choice. Meg smiled. He could tell that Raina was still a little fearful of the roasted pig's eyes. He was touched that she nodded, but there was no need for her to be a guinea pig. Launch it directly? Raina looked at Meg in surprise. She had never seen Meg make roasted pig's eyes before. He had proposed this dish early in the morning. Was he going to put it on the menu for the customers to order without letting anyone try it? Yes. Meg nodded and explained, this is a dish from my hometown. I'm confident. Raina nodded slightly and did not ask any more questions. When the boss said he was confident, he had never failed. After the morning service, Meg took out a small blackboard, wrote a line of words on it, and hung it on the door. Then, Meg moved a reclining chair and placed it at the door. There was a small stove beside his hand and a pottery pot on top of it. The fragrance of black tea flowed out along with the steam. Basking in the warm winter sun, Meg closed his eyes contentedly and enjoyed this rare leisure time. After a while, Meg tilted his head and looked at Gloria, who was standing beside the teapot. He sat up and smiled. Miss Gloria, when did you arrive? In fact, he had sensed that someone was coming 5 minutes ago. The familiar fragrance allowed him to guess who it was without opening his eyes. The warm winter sun was too comfortable, so he was reluctant to open his eyes. I've just arrived. Sorry to disturb Mr. Meg's sunbathing, Gloria said apologetically. Perhaps it was because the sun was too hot today, or perhaps it was because the side of his face with his eyes closed was too sharp, but her face was slightly red. I'm just taking a nap under the sun. How is that disturbing? Meg smiled and shook his head. He pointed at the chair beside the stove and said, the tea is ready. I was worried that no one would drink it with me. I wonder if Miss Gloria has the time to drink with me. My pleasure. Gloria smiled and sat down. She naturally picked up the handkerchief on the table and poured the amber tea into 2 cups. Speaking of which, the two had already drunk tea together a few times. They could be considered close tea friends. The fragrance of the tea slowly drifted over, causing one's state of mind to gradually calm down. Suede must be very busy these days, right? Meg asked with a smile as he held the thick ceramic cup in his hand. He felt the warmth from the cup through his fingertips. Yes. I bought a piece of land in the north of the city and built a new factory. I'm planning to move all the production lines to the factory in the north of the city after I finish making the down jackets. Gloria nodded slightly. The new factory is already built. Meg was slightly surprised. He didn't expect Gloria to be so bold and decisive. Last month, he heard from her that the current factory wasn't enough to provide the clothes needed by Suede. He didn't expect her to buy a piece of land and build a new factory so quickly. Yes. Gloria nodded. Then she said with a bit of worry, it's just that tailors are too hard to hire. Many tailors have very high salary requirements. They're almost charging according to the price they set for the tailors themselves, which raises the cost a lot. Charging according to the price they set for the tailors with ready-made blueprints. Meg raised his eyebrows. These tailors were too shameless. Maybe they know the price of Suede. Here's my personal opinion. Since we're moving to a new factory, let's further split the process of making the clothes. As long as we standardize the process, except for the high-end clothes, we only need the assembly line workers to make the clothes in batches. We don't need tailors at all. Meg looked at Gloria and suggested, you can pick a group of honest and reliable tailors from the existing tailors. Let them be the workshop supervisors and technicians. They'll be responsible for managing the different processes and ensuring the quality of the clothes. Further splitting the process? Gloria thought carefully for a while. Then her eyes lit up and she said, if we can further split the process, we can solve the shortage of tailors and the problem of the high cost of labor. The tailors who are promoted to management positions can continue to use their expertise and control the overall quality of the clothes. This is indeed the most efficient way right now. Because this is a brand new model, you have to have a trustworthy assistant who can control the overall situation. At the same time, you need a group of workers who are easy to manage so that Suede can get through the transition period quickly, Meg continued. Uncle Mars is a very talented manager. He's been managing the factory for me during this period. I believe he'll be able to handle the management of the new factory. As for the workers, a conflicted look appeared on Gloria's face. Blue Suede already had over 200 employees, and there were indeed some lazy and disobedient workers among them. The new factory still needed to recruit more workers, and it was most likely going to be difficult to recruit good workers. Do you know that a group of elves came to Chaos City recently? Meg asked. I heard that Princess Irina of the elven race brought tens of thousands of elves to Chaos City. Gloria nodded. This wasn't a secret in Chaos City, but she didn't know why Meg was bringing it up. Princess Irina has been dining at Mammoth recently. I can ask her if there are any elves who need jobs. Perhaps she can help you solve the problem of workers, Meg said with a smile. Elven workers? Gloria was pleasantly surprised. Elves were the most well-received species in Chaos City's employee market. Both their work attitude and work efficiency were highly valued by all bosses. If the new factory could be replaced with a group of elven workers, it would definitely be a good thing for Suede. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1612. Yes, all elven workers, and I will try my best to get them to deploy elves with experience in weaving. Meg nodded with a smile. Meg felt that if he changed his career to become a talent agent, he would definitely become a big catfish in Chaos City's talent market in a short period of time. After all, he had close to 30,000 night elves who were ready to work in his hands. Such workers who were not expensive and had high overall quality were simply the dream of every employer. Of course, Meg couldn't bear to let such high-quality talents go out to be exploited by other capitalists. He had a few big projects in his hands that were progressing at the same time, and a huge industrial chain that encompassed the upper and lower reaches of the textile industry was being laid out. His target wasn't just Chaos City's market. Meanwhile, Gloria, Raina, and the others were a part of the business landscape. Meg was also happy to let the night elves get employed there and push their career to another level. If it's possible, it would definitely be a qualitative leap for Suede. Gloria couldn't hide her excitement. Meg continued with a smile and said, the textile factory I invested in has already started to deliver the goods. When you have time, you can go to the north of the city to meet the person in charge. If your current channel can support the factory's output, we can talk about cooperation. I've already sorted out Family Morton's textile industry channels this month. I've cut off the backward and loss-making production lines, and also cut off some suppliers with poor quality and outdated designs. However, I've retained the core transportation and sales team. If the evaluation confirms that the quality of your textile factory's fabric is suitable, we will use it as the main selling point, Gloria said. Meg had mentioned this cooperation before, so after she took over Family Morton's textile industry, she carried out drastic reforms. She removed more than half of the industrial chain that originally integrated production, transportation, and sales, and only retained the core transportation and sales team. She learned a lot from Meg. Professionals earned professional money, so they didn't have to eat up the entire industry's upper and lower reaches completely. Very good. When you have time, go to the north of the city and look for an elf called Ashley. She's now the person in charge of the factory. Meg looked at Gloria with slight admiration. It seemed like she had indeed grown a lot during this period. All right. Gloria nodded slightly. She lowered her head and picked up her teacup, avoiding Meg's gaze. She felt her cheeks heat up, as if she had been scalded by his burning gaze. Gloria didn't stay for long. She left after drinking a cup of tea. Meg took a nap under the sun. When he woke up, he opened his eyes and saw a seductive face, sexy red wavy hair, and slender phoenix eyes. His gaze moved down slightly, and her full breasts were almost right in front of him. A faint fragrance assailed his nostrils, and it was a scent that could easily make one sink into it. Meg narrowed his eyes, feeling a little familiar. When the woman saw that Meg had woken up, she took a step back and asked Meg, "Hey, are you the owner of this restaurant?" "Hey, isn't this Angela?" After the woman took a step back, Meg finally saw her face clearly. He couldn't help being slightly stunned. When they were on the Demon Islands, their restaurant's one-day employee, Miss Succubus, was Angela. After she disappeared mysteriously that day, Meg didn't expect to meet her again in Chaos City. This really surprised and dazed him. Angela looked at Meg, who was staring at her in a daze, and pursed her lips. All men were the same. They couldn't control their eyes and lower bodies when they saw her. "Yes, I'm the owner of this restaurant. The restaurant isn't open for business yet. If you want to eat, you have to wait for about an hour," Meg said calmly as he quickly retracted his gaze and glanced at his watch. He didn't have much to do with this extraordinary Miss Succubus, and he couldn't expose what happened on the Demon Islands. Hence, he didn't intend to claim this employee. It was best for them to meet peacefully like this. This fellow is actually asking me to wait." Angela looked at Meg, who retracted his gaze and ignored her, with a hint of surprise in her eyes. Furthermore, there were seats here. Why didn't he ask her to sit down and wait, and even get her a cup of warm tea when she was thirsty? Meg poured himself a cup of tea, and sipped it slowly while ignoring Angela. "I say." Angela opened her mouth. Mag raised his head to look at her politely, and his eyes met the pair of long and narrow blue almond-shaped eyes. The mysterious and bewitching eyes suddenly began to spin like an endless whirlpool, trying to pull him into the abyss. "What's the matter?" Meg asked. You're actually not bewitched by the eyes of enchantment." Angela's expression froze. She looked at Meg, who was looking at her calmly as if she was a fool, in disbelief. Although the other party was an 8th-tier succubus, the eyes of enchantment that she released at will could easily bewitch and control men and make them kneel before her. However, his mental strength was above level 10 after all, and he had also been baptized by the Great Old Ones. In the face of this level of the eyes of enchantment, he didn't even feel dizzy. However, this lady really liked to release the eyes of enchantment on strangers. It seemed like she was someone who always wanted to prove her charm value. Could this fellow be a powerful magic caster? No, there's no magical aura on him at all. Then, Angela's face revealed a hint of understanding. Seems like he can't do it, either. Her eyes of enchantment had only failed twice when it came to ordinary men. The first time was when she met that bearded crab demon boss on Carapace Island. Although he couldn't do it, he had an extremely beautiful wife and an extremely cute daughter. Then, it was this time. This man looked quite handsome, and the curves of his body hidden under his clothes were far better than ordinary men's. She didn't expect him to be unable to do it. Sigh, what a pity. Angela looked at Meg with some pity in her eyes. Meg retracted his gaze, and continued to drink his tea. This lady's brain doesn't seem to be normal, either. After realizing that she was ignored again, Angela wasn't too angry. She retracted her eyes of enchantment. For a man who couldn't do it, it was a little too hurtful. She coughed softly, and said in the purest voice she could muster, "Then, can I sit here for a while?" "Have a seat. If you want to drink tea, pour it yourself," Meg said without even turning his head. Although Angela had only been an employee for half a day, he hadn't given her her salary yet. It wasn't too much to ask for a cup of tea. "Thank you." Angela poured a cup of hot tea and held it in her hands. The warmth dispelled the cold, and made her face flush. She turned to look at Meg curiously, and asked, "I heard that you can make spicy crayfish." Chapter 16:13. Millimeter. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly, but his tone was very calm as he replied. "You mean those super big crayfish that are numb, spicy, and spicy?" Angela continued to ask. Because the eyes of enchantment didn't work on Meg, she could only answer him verbally. Millimeter. Meg replied again. He glanced at Angela from the corner of his eye. Could this succubus have noticed something? After getting Meg's confirmation, Angela sighed in disappointment. She mumbled, "Sigh, although you know how to cook, it's definitely not as delicious as that guy on Carapace Island." Meg didn't reply. She wasn't talking to him anyway. Do you know him? That man who sells crayfish on Carapace Island? The one whose wife is especially beautiful, Angela asked Meg. I don't know him. Meg shook his head and glanced at Angela. Is this fellow thinking about his crayfish or his wife? His wife is really beautiful. She's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Angela sighed with some pity in her expression. Miss, if you're hungry now, you can go ahead and take a look. There are a few good restaurants there, and the food isn't any worse than ours. Meg recommended with a smile. He regretted asking her to sit down and have tea with him. Heh, I'm not hungry. I just like your restaurant. Angela shook her head and stared into Meg's eyes. Her long and narrow phoenix eyes squinted slightly as she asked curiously, Don't you have any feelings for me at all? Everyone else wants me to stay and look forward to something happening with me, but you want to chase me away. I don't have any feelings. Meg shook his head honestly. He had already jumped out of the low-level desire zone. He wouldn't be moved by a strange woman's coquettishness. It's all right. I'm quite interested in your restaurant. Angela, on the other hand, looked back at the restaurant indifferently. Through the transparent floor-to-ceiling glass, there was an exquisite restaurant that made people want to go in and have a seat. Up to you. Meg was too lazy to argue with her. He finished the tea in his hand in one gulp and got up to tidy up the tea set. Aren't you going to sit and drink some tea with me? Angela asked Meg, who was carrying the tea set and putting away the recliner. I'm going to prepare for the opening. Sorry, I can't accompany you, Meg said without even turning his head. Then can I go in and have a seat? Angela stood up and asked expectantly. No. Meg's voice did not have any room for negotiation, just like a door that was resolutely closed. This guy. Angela looked at the closed door in front of her and raised her eyebrows. He has quite a personality. No male had ever treated her like this before. This guy was the first. No, the second. All right. At least he left me a cup. That means he's not completely heartless, Angela mumbled with a smile as she held the ceramic cup in her hand. Two men who were passing by saw this scene, and were stunned. They only came back to their senses when they bumped into a big tree. Heh, men. Angela glanced at the two men who were awkwardly crawling up from the ground, and pursed her lips. My charm is still irresistible. Seems like she didn't come specially to look for me. She came because she heard about the crayfish. Since she knows that the crayfish restaurant on Carapace Island is missing, that means she should have come back to look for them, and persevered to find Chaos City. Meg put down the recliner, and fell into deep thought as he looked at Angela, who was sitting outside the door. He didn't know much about her, but surprisingly, Irina seemed to have a good impression of her. As a succubus, she actually reached the 8th tier at such a young age. Her talent and power were both very shocking. Irina seems to have interacted with her more. I'll let her decide how to deal with it. Meg quickly convinced himself, and began to prepare for the lunch service. Firis, MIA, and the rest came to the restaurant one after another. There's a very beautiful succubus outside. Although it's because of her racial talent, it's my first time seeing such a beautiful succubus, Yarbemia said as she walked in, and was stunned. Yes. She doesn't look very old, but she emits a seductive aura that makes one unable to look away. Raina nodded with a tinge of envy. She felt that she was filled with a man's aura, and she was like a professional chef in the kitchen instead of a kitchen maid. Isn't it just a little more meat? Barbara snorted. She glanced at her flat airport, and suddenly felt a little discouraged. A rare 8th-tier succubus with outstanding talent, Elizabeth commented. Everyone was excitedly discussing that beautiful and powerful succubus at the door. However, Jane came to the kitchen with surprise and worry. She looked at Meg, who was braising tofu, and softly said, Boss, that Angela, who stayed in the shop for 2 days on Carapace Island, is right outside the door now. Millimeter, I saw her. I even had a cup of tea with her. Meg nodded with a smile. Jane was stunned. Before coming to Chaos City, Meg had reminded her many times not to tell anyone about what happened on Carapace Island. But now that this Angela had come to Chaos City, she might recognize them and reveal what happened on Carapace Island. Wasn't Meg worried at all? Did she see you when she came in? Meg asked Jane. She should have. Jane nodded. Because she was too shocked, she couldn't help but take a few more glances at Angela. When their gazes met, she also saw Angela's shock. In that case, Meg pondered. He managed to fool himself, but forgot about Jane. It seemed like he still had to have a deep conversation with Angela. Do we need to silence her? Jane asked softly. Not necessarily. Meg shook his head with a smile as he looked at the conflicted Jane. He thought for a while, and said, You don't have to worry about this. I will handle it. Millimeter HM. Jane nodded, and didn't ask further. Anyway, the boss and lady boss could settle everything. She didn't have to worry. Why does that lady with a little golden horn on her head look a little familiar? Angela, who had already stood up from her stool and joined the queue, looked at the door thoughtfully. After confirming with her gaze, the other party should have seen her before. Who could it be? Angela felt that the lady looked very familiar, but she couldn't be sure of her identity at that moment. Big Sister Angela, why are you in Chaos City? Right at this moment, a soft voice sounded beside her. Chapter 16:14. Angela was stunned when she heard the voice. She turned to look at the little girl who was looking at her curiously. This was a half-elf little girl with long silver hair and blue eyes. She was wearing a white shirt, and looked very chubby and cute. She felt that she shouldn't know this little girl, but it was her first day in Chaos City. How did this little girl know her name? Moreover, when she heard this voice and saw the little girl's cute appearance, a small figure still jumped into her mind unconsciously. In her memory, such a cute little girl was only the daughter of the crayfish boss on Carapace Island. Did I get the wrong person? Amy looked at Angela, who didn't respond to her, and frowned in confusion. She continued, I am little Amy, you're back. The restaurant's door suddenly opened, and Meg walked out with a smile. He held Amy's hand and walked into the restaurant. Amy? Little Amy? Angela's eyes suddenly lit up as she looked at Amy. Although she didn't have that pair of crab pincers on her head, and her appearance had changed a little, the image of the two quickly overlapped in her mind. Her figure was the same, and her tone was the same as well. Why would the crayfish restaurant owner's daughter appear in Chaos City? Was the crayfish restaurant that turned into ruins a natural disaster or a man-made disaster? Was the family of 3 that went missing mysteriously still alive? Why did this fellow stop the little fellow from speaking? Questions popped up in Angela's mind. She stepped forward and looked at Amy, who was about to be dragged away by Meg, and said, Little girl, blink if you're kidnapped. Kidnapped? Meg and Amy turned to look at Angela strangely at the same time. He's my father, Amy said with a smile. Miss, slander is illegal in Chaos City, Meg said, pretending to be serious. Although I also feel that Mr. Mac shouldn't have such a cute daughter like Little Boss, isn't it too much to say that she's kidnapped? Is this the restaurant's new pre-meal performance? Could this beautiful succubus be the restaurant's new employee? The guests also roared with laughter. Did I make a mistake? Angela frowned as she listened to everyone's words. Let's go. It's time to eat. Meg held Amy's hand with a resigned expression as they made their way into the restaurant. He had been thinking about everything, but he had completely forgotten about Amy. However, he couldn't blame her. Even he hadn't thought that he would meet Angela in Chaos City. Goodbye, Big Sister Angela. Amy waved at Angela enthusiastically before following Amy into the house. My intuition tells me that they are the same person, but why are there so many things that don't match? If this little girl was Xiao Ari, then why did she call the owner of this restaurant father? What does the lobster restaurant thousands of miles away have to do with this restaurant? Angela looked at the slowly closing door of the restaurant, her mind full of doubts. She felt that she was infinitely close to the truth, but she couldn't figure it out at all. "Father, don't you recognize her? Isn't she the big sister who worked in the restaurant when we were selling crayfish on Carapace Island?" Amy asked as she followed Meg into the house. I know it's her." Meg nodded. This little fellow's memory wasn't any worse than his, so he didn't try to fool her. Furthermore, after Amy's reminder, Angela had already guessed their identities as long as she wasn't stupid. Then, is she going to continue being an employee at the restaurant? Amy continued to ask. Meg pondered seriously for a while. "I'm not too sure, but this is indeed a good suggestion. As the saying went, fortune comes from danger." Instead of silencing her for no reason, he might as well arrange for her to stay by his side and find a way to make sure she understood everything. Then, he wouldn't have to worry about her causing any trouble. "Look, isn't Camilla quite obedient now?" Irina came back for lunch. The moment she entered, she looked at Meg and said, "An acquaintance is here." "Yes." Meg nodded. "How do you plan to deal with her?" Irina looked at Meg with a faint smile. "You were the one who recruited this employee, so you have the final say on how to deal with her." Meg took the opportunity to push the blame back. He tried his best not to complicate the matter and maintain his purity. "I think she's quite interesting. If she's willing to work in the restaurant, why don't we let her stay?" Irina said with a smile. Meg glanced at Irina and became more vigilant. Angela had shown an unusual interest in Irina, and now it seemed that Irina also had a good impression of her. This wasn't a very good sign. "Is there a problem?" "No, I'm also a little worried that she'll talk nonsense about what happened on Carapace Island. Perhaps it's a good choice to keep her." Meg shook his head. She was just a succubus, and he was very confident in his charm. After deciding on a solution, how to make Angela willing to join Mammis became a problem worth thinking about. "Roasted pig's eyes." This violent dish name really doesn't fit Mr. Mac's naming style at all. Just hearing the name of the dish gives me goosebumps. Don't tell me Mr. Mac is really going to dig out the pig's eyes and roast them. Hee hee. I'm already starting to get excited. Outside the restaurant, the customers were discussing the notice hanging on the door. The main reason was that the impact of the dish name was too strong, and it was hard for them to ignore it. They couldn't help but look forward to it, but it would be a lie to say that they weren't looking forward to it at all. "He won't even let the pig's eyes go. I didn't expect this boss to have such a perverted side behind his gentle appearance." Angela also noticed the meaning of the notice on the little blackboard, and couldn't help but purse her lips. She came to Chaos City this time to find a suitable place for her sisters to live. Although the remote island was quiet and undisturbed, it was really a little lonely. During this period of time, there were sisters forming teams to escape every few days. She actually felt like she was imprisoning them. Hence, she chose to come to Chaos City, and planned to inspect this neutral city known as the City of Freedom. She wanted to see if the succubi living here were really respected from the bottom of their hearts before deciding if she should move her base to Chaos City. She made a trip to Carapace Island on her way here. The original crayfish restaurant had already become a wasteland. There were still a few crayfish restaurants left on the island, but their business was rather prosperous. It was said that they were opened by the disciples of the original crayfish restaurant owner, and had already become a famous delicacy. After she came to Chaos City, she heard that this Mammis was also selling crayfish, so she came here on a whim. "I want to see if the crayfish in Chaos City is as delicious as those on Carapace Island," Angela mumbled to herself softly. Chapter 16:15. The restaurant opened for business, and the customers entered the restaurant one after another. Angela chose a seat in the corner, and flipped open the menu on the table. The menu was rather rich, and all of them were dishes she had never heard of before. Red braised pork, beggar's chicken, steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. They all looked like strange dishes, and made her confused. So many dishes. That boss doesn't seem to know how to cook so many dishes. Angela mumbled. Her eyes lit up when she saw the crayfish, but she frowned again when she saw the price. This boss is so black-hearted. He actually sells a crayfish for 1,000 copper coins. It's 10 times more expensive than Carapace Island. She reached out to touch her pocket, and hesitated for a while. She looked up at Yarbemia, who had been standing at the side for a while, and said, "I want a spicy crayfish." "All right, give me a moment." Yarbemia nodded with a smile, and walked to the next customer. The waitresses in this restaurant are all so beautiful. There are half-dragons, magic casters, elves, and so on. Angela looked around curiously, and her gaze quickly landed on Jane again. She paused at the golden horn on her forehead for a while, and said firmly in her heart, "It's her. The one and only golden horn, the waitress at the crayfish restaurant on Carapace Island. The half-elf girl who seems to be Ari, the same waitress, and Boss Can't, who also didn't react to the eyes of Succubus." Angela's eyes became brighter and brighter, and the answer seemed to be coming out. "But, where's the lady boss?" Angela looked around, trying to find that beautiful figure. Angela was very disappointed that she couldn't find the lady boss. This made her doubt her own judgment again. This doesn't make sense. He wouldn't have lost such a beautiful wife, would he? Angela mumbled with a frown as she stretched her neck to look at Meg, who was busy behind the glass display window. Harrison, who was sitting opposite her, tidied his clothes, and asked a little uneasily, "Miss, is there something wrong with my bearing?" He had mustered all his courage to sit opposite this beautiful and seductive succubus lady. However, she seemed to be sizing him up from just now. Those seductive eyes and face made his heart beat faster, and he finally couldn't help but ask. Angela's gaze finally landed on Harrison, and she raised her eyebrows slightly. She didn't like eating at the same table with strangers, but she had already noticed that this restaurant seemed to have a tradition of sharing tables. Since elves could tolerate sitting at the same table with demons, she couldn't say anything. However, the human in front of her was too fat. He was about 3 times her size. Although his eyes were squinted, she didn't feel offended because they were squinted by his fat. "I'm not looking at you," Angela said honestly. I'm sorry." Harrison's face reddened. He felt that he had embarrassed himself to the core. How could he have asked such a question? "It's okay. Maybe it's because you're too big, so you feel like everyone is looking at you." Angela shook her head and didn't take it to heart. "Why, do I feel a sudden pain in my heart?" Harrison clutched his chest in discomfort. Angela also realized that her words were a little hurtful. She tried to explain, "I didn't mean that. I just feel that you're blocking my view." Harrison felt himself becoming smaller and smaller. He slowly curled up into a ball on the chair, and asked meekly, "Is this okay?" "Yes, it's pretty good." Angela glanced in the direction of the kitchen. Now, she didn't have to stretch her neck. She nodded with satisfaction. "I didn't expect there to be such a special succubus." Harrison sighed in his heart. It was said that succubi had a talent for seducing people, and they were very good at using this. However, this succubus in front of him seemed to be a little different. "Are you a regular of the restaurant?" Angela suddenly asked Harrison. "Yes, I should be one of the earliest regulars of Mammoth. I became a regular not long after the restaurant opened. I've seen it go from a restaurant with very few customers to a famous and popular restaurant in the city where you have to line up for a long time just to eat a meal." Harrison nodded. There was a hint of pride in his tone, as if he was also a witness and participant in this great cause. "Oh." Angela's eyes lit up a little, and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. She revealed a charming smile, and said, "Then, when did this restaurant open?" Harrison's heartstrings were tugged by Angela's smile. He quickly answered, "It should be close to half a year ago. It opened in early autumn. It's already late winter now." "Half a year." Angela frowned when she heard that. If that was the case, it didn't match the timeline of that lobster restaurant on Carapace Island. Could it be that there was a problem with her previous deduction? Yes, Mr. Mac is also a good wine that doesn't need to be afraid of the dark alley. Previously, this area was almost deserted. There were only a few blacksmiths and funeral shops. Then, this restaurant appeared out of nowhere. However, As the restaurant launched more and more delicacies, its reputation rose day by day. It revitalized all the shops in this area, and became what it is now, Harrison lamented. Is that half-elf girl really the boss's daughter? Angela continued to ask. Harrison nodded, and said, of course the little boss is Mr. Mac's daughter. This is something that everyone knows. Don't be fooled by her young age. She's a very powerful magic caster, and even has the Lord of Ice and the Lord of Fire as her masters. She's a little genius magic caster in Chaos City. Is that so? Angela didn't expect that little girl to have such a powerful background. She hesitated for a while, and continued to ask, then, what about his wife? What about the lady boss of the restaurant? Mr. Mac's wife? Harrison looked at Angela, and suddenly wanted to hug his chubby self. Indeed, the reason why the goddess took the initiative to talk to him was not because she wanted to know more about him, but because she liked the handsome Mr. Mac, who could cook. Mr. Mac doesn't have a wife. He's one of the few golden bachelors in Chaos City. The girls who want to marry him can line up from Mammoth to the city gate. However, he hasn't had any scandals for such a long time. He's very chaste, Harrison said. No wife. Angela fell into deep thought again. Although she didn't use the eyes of enchantment, she was sure that this chubby man wasn't lying to her. However, the information she got from him was completely different from her previous deductions and judgments. This made her a little confused. Hello, here's your spicy crayfish. Just then, Yarbemia placed a plate of spicy crayfish in front of Angela. That's it. Angela's eyes widened, and she almost jumped out of her chair. No pop-up window. Chapter 16:16. Angela looked at the crayfish lying quietly on the plate. The bright red crayfish was even bigger than her face. It was cut open from the head to the tail, revealing the plump meat inside. It looked exactly the same as the spicy crayfish from IE Crayfish Restaurant. The appearance is the same, the fragrance is the same too. This spicy crayfish is the taste of IE Crayfish Restaurant. Angela was a little agitated. Her deduction was right. This restaurant was definitely related to IE Crayfish Restaurant. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a similar taste. She had tried all the crayfish restaurants on Carapace Island, and none of them could replicate it to such an extent. They didn't even deserve to be called spicy crayfish. Mr. Mac's spicy crayfish is the best. Although this flavor was introduced later, it's not inferior to the braised crayfish at all. It's a top delicacy that goes well with wine. Harrison couldn't help but interrupt when he saw Angela's agitated expression. I know, Angela answered casually. Angela replied casually. She couldn't wait to taste the spicy crayfish herself and see if it was really the same as IE Crayfish Restaurants. If it was, she had to get to the bottom of this matter and find out what kind of conspiracy was behind it. The spicy aroma made one's throat burn slightly, but it also made one salivate. She reached out to grab the huge crayfish and twisted off its head. The plump crayfish butter almost overflowed. The fresh aroma together with the heat wafted over. Even the spiciness couldn't cover it up. Gulp. Angela's throat bobbed. If she had always thought that her obsession with IE Crayfish Restaurant was because of that beautiful lady boss, she was now sure that at least half of it was because of this crayfish that she couldn't forget after tasting it. Slurp. Angela put the crayfish head to her mouth and sucked. Oh, this damn fresh taste. The crayfish butter melted in her mouth without any fishy taste. There was a storm-like spiciness amidst the freshness and sweetness. The reserved aroma was perfectly displayed in this mouthful of crayfish butter. The spicy and fresh aroma were perfectly displayed in this mouthful. The spicy soup was like a scoop of hot water on her taste buds. Her tongue instantly went numb, and the spiciness spread through her tongue. Her body quickly heated up. Slash, accompanied by a crisp sound. A tear appeared on Angela's black blouse, and it almost couldn't stop the surging waves. Yes. This was the smell. This is the feeling. Angela's face was flushed, and her bright eyes were a little blurred. She felt like she was about to get lost in this damn delicacy, but she clearly realized that this was 100% the same taste as the spicy crayfish from IE Crayfish Restaurant. Gulp. Harrison, who was sitting across from him, tried his best to avert his gaze and not look at the shocking curve that burst out from the lapel, but he still couldn't help but gulp. What was this? He just wanted to have a meal, that's all. To think that there would be such benefits. However, why did he vaguely sense the holy light? Harrison felt like he had seen something, but at the same time, he felt like he had not seen anything. The beautiful scene of her clothes exploding was actually blocked by a harmonious holy light. Since she ordered the spicy crayfish, it seems like a showdown is inevitable. How should I fool this girl who doesn't look very smart? Meg glanced at Angela, whose chest was blocked by the holy light in the kitchen. This familiar light made him respect her, and his heart was incomparably pure. SSS tilde ha tilde SSS tilde ha. Angela put down the clean crayfish head in her hand and stuck out her tongue, trying to calm her spicy tongue a little. However, this level of spiciness was obviously not something that could be suppressed by sticking out her tongue. She stared at the crayfish meat on the plate, and couldn't wait to grab the crayfish that was as thick as a baby's arm. She easily peeled it from the back of the crayfish, revealing the plump meat inside. She grabbed the meat, dipped it in the soup, and put it into her mouth. She had already gotten used to the spiciness. The plump crayfish meat appeared like a spring breeze calming a huge wave, and then plunged into the deep water. The spicy taste and the fresh crayfish meat blossomed with a breathtaking deliciousness under the contrast of all kinds of spices. The spicy soup and the plump crayfish meat combined perfectly. The fiery taste stimulated her taste buds completely, and almost lifted her head. She could feel the wonderful chewiness of her teeth colliding with the meat as she chewed. The spicy taste was especially refreshing. The spicier it was, the more she chewed. It was so delicious that she couldn't stop. This is too delicious. Angela was screaming in her heart. The taste buds in her mouth were also welcoming this suffocating deliciousness without holding back. It had been a long time. This mouthful of crayfish made her feel the true essence of delicacies. The wonderful taste that she had been yearning for the past few months, the taste that kept tugging at her heartstrings on that small island, the familiar taste that she couldn't find anywhere on Carapace Island, was found in Chaos City thousands of kilometers away. He was sure that this was definitely not a coincidence. There was no chef in this world who could make a spicy crayfish that tasted exactly the same. Such exquisite deliciousness was not something that any chef could master. She was sure that the owner of this restaurant must have some unknown relationship with the owner of IE Crayfish Restaurant. Maybe they learned crayfish from the same master? Angela thought as she looked in the direction of the kitchen with her tongue out. "Miss, can I treat you to a glass of beer?" Harrison said to Angela with a smile as he pushed the glass of beer that was just placed on the table towards Angela. Angela retracted her gaze and looked at the amber liquid in the transparent crystal glass on the table. There was even a layer of white foam floating on the surface. "There's even beer." Angela was shocked again. Although the glass had been changed, this special wine should be the same as the one in IE Crayfish Restaurant. Right now, there was a burning sensation in her mouth. If she could have a glass of cold beer, it would naturally be a wonderful thing. Of course, she was more curious if the beer in this restaurant was the same as the one in IE Crayfish Restaurant. "Thank you." Angela glanced at Harrison, and made sure that he didn't have any other motives. She thanked him, and reached out to take the glass. The faint aroma of hops wafted over. She tilted her head back and took a sip. The cold beer flowed into her mouth, and then down her throat. Slurp. Angela could vaguely hear the beautiful sound of a raging fire being extinguished. The burning sensation was instantly suppressed, and the refreshing feeling went straight to her soul. She couldn't help but clamp her legs together, and let out an involuntary moan. Millimeter, no pop-up window. Chapter 16-17. Angela could confirm that the spicy crayfish and beer she had at Mammoth were exactly the same as the ones she had at IE Restaurant. That was because she had once believed that no one in this world could make such delicious crayfish other than Boss Hades, let alone make crayfish that tasted exactly the same. However, not only did she taste the same spicy crayfish today, but she also tasted the exact same beer. In this restaurant tens of thousands of miles away from Carapace Island, she found the taste that she had been searching for all this while. Harrison felt that his eyes were going to be blinded by that holy light, so he could only look away. However, it was said that succubi were tempting little spirits. He had finally seen it for himself this time. Even though he couldn't see anything, he still felt like his heartstrings were being tugged. Angela put down the glass, licked her lips, and looked in the direction of the kitchen. She looked at Meg's side profile, and narrowed her eyes slightly. She secretly made up her mind. No matter what kind of relationship this fellow has with Hades, I must find them out. But, how can I get in touch with him? This fellow is completely immune to my eyes of enchantment. It's obviously impossible to enchant him like a normal man. Angela quickly fell into deep thought again. She couldn't help but have a headache when she thought of how that fellow had completely ignored her in the morning. A fellow like that was really too difficult to deal with. Thank you for the beer. Angela looked away, and casually fastened her clothes again. She looked at Harrison, who was eating a steak with his eyes lowered, and smiled. Why, you're welcome. Harrison waved his hand, feeling flattered. He smiled sheepishly. It seemed like this glass of beer was very good. It actually succeeded in making this succubus take the initiative to talk to him. Then, is this restaurant still hiring employees? I would like to find a job, Angela continued. Mammis probably doesn't need any employees, right? After all, each of the ladies here can take on the role of two. It's so easy to control such a big place. Harrison shook his head. Looking at the troubled Angela, he couldn't help but feel pity for her. If you're looking for a job, I happen to be looking for a secretary. The job is easy, and the salary isn't low. I wonder if that won't be necessary. I just want to work in this restaurant. Before Harrison could finish, Angela had already declined his offer. I've cracked. Harrison's lips moved. He felt like he had suffered another blow. That was right. There were many young ladies in Chaos City who wanted to marry Mr. Mac, and there were many who wanted to work at Mammis. After all, many young ladies saw this as a shortcut to becoming the lady boss of Mammis. Of course, even if she couldn't become the lady boss of Mammis, being an employee of Mammis would still be a blissful thing. They didn't need to line up to eat all kinds of delicacies in the restaurant every day. It was said that they could even eat tofu pudding for every meal. This was simply the dream of 900 million young ladies. Angela continued to eat her prawns. She did want to find a job and a place to stay temporarily in Chaos City. She had almost used up all the cash she had to make arrangements for her sisters. Now, she only had less than 500 copper coins in her pocket. Of course, with her talent and beauty, it wasn't difficult for her to earn some money. It was just that she didn't want to earn money by selling her looks and sucking up to men. That would be a humiliation to her. If she could work in this restaurant, she could investigate the relationship between this boss and Boss Hades. At the same time, she could earn her living expenses by working. This was undoubtedly a very good choice. After lunch, Angela paid the bill and left. However, she didn't go far. Instead, she loitered around the restaurant until it closed for business. Ding! Meg removed his apron, and was about to go upstairs to take a nap when he heard the bell. He was slightly stunned, and walked to the door. As soon as Meg opened the door, Angela, who was standing at the door, smiled at Meg, and said, "Hello, I'm Angela." Meg was a little surprised, but he didn't show it. Instead, he asked with a smile, "Hello, how can I help you?" Angela didn't see any change in Meg's expression. She continued to smile, and said, "I want to find a job, so I would like to ask if your restaurant is still hiring waiters." Waiters? Meg sized Angela up with restraint. He thought for a while, and said, "The restaurant is indeed hiring a new employee now." Angela's eyes lit up, and she said with surprise, "Then, can I give it a try? According to the usual rules, I need to do a simple assessment of your ability to determine if you are qualified for this job." Meg said calmly, but the corners of his mouth were curled up slightly. He was still thinking about how to get in touch with Angela, and didn't expect her to come knocking on his door. All right. Angela nodded. Although she felt that these words were a little familiar, she was full of confidence in herself. She was a rare genius of the succubus race, and the only succubus to successfully break through to the 7th level before the age of 20. How could she not be qualified for a mere waitress job? Please come in. Meg stepped aside to let Angela in. Angela walked in, and when she passed by Meg, she smelled a nice mint fragrance. It was very light, but it gave people a refreshing and clean feeling. Clack. Meg closed the door behind him and locked it. Angela raised her eyebrows when she heard the sound, but soon relaxed. She was an 8th level succubus. Even if she was in the same room with a strange man, she definitely wouldn't be the one to suffer in the end. Moreover, he still couldn't do it. Have a seat. Meg motioned for Angela to sit down. He poured a cup of warm water for her, and sat down directly opposite her. Thank you. Angela glanced at the cup of water and didn't rush to drink it. The work at Immerse is very busy and tiring. The number of guests you have to entertain every day is more than 1,500, but there are very few waiters in the restaurant. Are you sure you can handle such a heavy workload? Meg went straight to the point. I can. Angela nodded confidently. Then, what are you good at? Meg continued to ask. Good at? Yes, the employees of Immerse all have their own specialties. This way, I can assign work according to your abilities and maximize efficiency. Meg nodded. Angela seriously thought for a while, and suddenly her eyes lit up. She looked at Meg and said, I'm good at seducing people. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 16-18. Meg looked at Angela's sparkling eyes. She was really an honest girl. What's wrong? Angela asked in puzzlement when she saw Meg's strange expression. Nothing. It's just that this ability might not be very practical in the restaurant. Meg shook his head. How can that be? I just need to stand at the door, and I believe the number of customers coming to eat in your restaurant will double, Angela said confidently. The problem now is that even if the number of customers in the restaurant is reduced by half, it will still be enough to fill the empty seats in the restaurant. Meg shook his head with a smile. Such a beautiful and attractive succubus lady was indeed the dream hostess of many restaurants. As long as she showed a little bit of her charm, there would be customers lining up to eat. However, Amy's had already passed the stage where they needed to attract customers. There were countless customers who couldn't get in line every day. Then, Angela was a little frustrated when she heard that. She didn't expect her confident charm to be completely useless. After thinking seriously for a while, she said, Then I can serve the dishes. Your waiters seem to be a little lacking. The speed of serving the dishes should be faster. Yes, your observation is very detailed. We are indeed lacking a service specialist in charge of the designated hot pot area. Meg nodded. After Shirley went missing, the restaurant hadn't recruited suitable new employees. Now, they were relying on Barbara's spatial magic to support the lack of waiters. It was just that this method of serving the dishes lacked a sense of warmth. Then can I? Angela's eyes lit up again. Meg leaned back in his chair and looked at Angela as he said, I need you to show me that you are qualified for this job. Okay. Angela looked at Meg. Her blue eyes suddenly flickered, and 3 identical Angela appeared behind her. They bowed slightly to Meg at the same time, and said, Hello, boss. Clones. Meg looked at the 3 Angela, who looked no different from the real person, and then looked at Angela, who was sitting in front of him, and asked in surprise. Angela was very satisfied with Meg's expression. She said proudly, Yes, this is my doppelganger, a doppelganger that is half real. It can also take on the task of serving dishes. You recruited me, which means you recruited 4 employees at the same time. I alone can be responsible for the reception work of the designated hot pot area. A man who marries you is truly blessed. Meg muttered in his heart. He was indeed amazed by Angela's sudden display of ability. He smiled and said, I believe that with your ability, you are qualified for this job. Thank you. A smile appeared in Angela's eyes. As expected, as long as she showed her ability, there was nothing she couldn't handle. Meg stood up and extended his hand to Angela with a smile. I'm Meg. You can call me boss like the other employees. Angela, welcome to Mammoth. Thank you. Angela also stood up and shook Meg's hand. She had a strange feeling when she heard Meg's announcement. It's lunch break now, and the employees are not in the restaurant. I will introduce them to you at night. Meg sat down again and said to Angela, let's have a good talk about the remuneration and benefits. We will sign a labor contract. It will be a guarantee for both parties. Labor contract? Angela looked at Meg in bewilderment. It's just a contract. This is a rule unique to Chaos City. It's to protect you working people, Meg explained with a smile. Oh. Although Angela found it a little strange, she did as the Romans did, so she didn't think too much about it. Our restaurant's employees have a trial period of 1 month, and their salary during the trial period is 3,000 copper coins a month. However, due to your special ability, your salary during the trial period is 6,000 copper coins. After the 1-month trial period, I will evaluate your work ability. After you pass the trial period, your salary will be raised to 10,000 copper coins a month. 10,000 copper coins. Only enough for 10 spicy crayfish. Angela frowned. She felt that this salary was not in line with her expectations. The restaurant will provide 3 meals a day for the employees. All the dishes on the menu can be chosen. Currently, the meal supplement standard has been changed to have no upper limit, Meg explained with a smile. 1 crayfish per meal. Angela's eyes lit up. If you're not sick of it, up to you. Meg nodded. That sounds very good. Angela could not wait to sign the contract. Meg smiled. Indeed, no one could resist the attack of delicacies. He continued, do you have a place to stay in Chaos City? If not, the restaurant can provide a staff dormitory for you to stay with the other employees. It will be nearer to the restaurant, so it will be more convenient for you to go to work. I've just arrived at Chaos City. I don't have a place to stay. Angela shook her head honestly. It would be best if she could have a place to stay. She did not want to go around looking for a place to stay. It was too troublesome. All right. Then you can go back with the other colleagues after the dinner service ends. Meg nodded. He asked Angela to wait for a while he went upstairs to draft a labor contract. He used a contract paper that had the effect of a contract. Take a look at this labor contract. If you think there's no problem, sign your name at the back and put your thumbprint on it. Meg placed the labor contract in front of Angela, and reminded, the main thing is to look at the salary and benefits I promised you just now. Salary, benefits. Angela picked up the contract and looked at it seriously. The salary and benefits were indeed as Meg said, and the restrictions on the boss were very strict. If he did not follow the contract, not only would he have to pay 10 times the compensation, he would also be imprisoned. It was the first time Angela had heard of such a conscientious boss. But, what does this confidentiality agreement mean? Can't I mention anything about the restaurant to others? Angela asked as she pointed to a clause in the employees' code of conduct. It said, employees are not allowed to discuss anything about the restaurant and the boss' personal life. They are not allowed to reveal any information that is not allowed by the boss to any third party. It's a restaurant. We have to keep it a secret. Otherwise, the streets will be filled with spicy crayfish in a few days. Meg looked at Angela nonchalantly and smilingly said, You're not here to spy on the recipe, are you? I'm not interested in cooking. Angela shook her head and signed her name at the bottom of the contract. At the same time, she pricked her thumb and pressed her thumbprint on her name. A golden light shone from the contract and split into 2. It was imprinted on Meg's and Angela's foreheads respectively. Very good. The contract has been signed successfully. Meg kept the contract with a smile. Boss, have you been to the Demon Islands before? Angela asked Meg calmly as she licked her fingers. Yeah, I've been to Carapace Island. Meg nodded nonchalantly as well. Chapter 16-19. Angela stared at Meg. She really didn't expect the words she wanted to hear to come out of Meg's mouth so easily. Carapace Island. Angela tried her best to control her emotions as she stared into Meg's eyes and asked, "When did you go there?" "I forgot. My memory isn't very good." Meg shook his head slightly. He had already gotten the contract and signed the confidentiality agreement, so he had the initiative now. Even if Angela knew something, she would be bound by the contract and couldn't say anything. "Then what did you go to Carapace Island for?" "I heard that it's a very chaotic island, and there's nothing special about it." Angela pretended to be curious and asked, "Oh, that?" Meg looked at Angela with a smile, and said, "It's a secret." This fellow." Angela looked at Meg's naughty smile, and wanted to slap a chair on his face angrily. She felt that the answer was about to come out, but he just had to stop her. Angela didn't want to beat around the bush, and asked Meg directly, "I stayed on Carapace Island for a period of time previously. There's a restaurant called IE Crayfish Restaurant there, and the boss is called Hades. The crayfish and beer he makes are exactly the same as the ones I had at Mammoth. May I ask if you guys know each other?" "Hades? He's my disciple." Meg nodded. "Disciple?" "Yes. Back then, there was a young crayfish monster who came from afar and came to me to seek to be my disciple. I took him in as my disciple because of his sincerity and taught him how to make 3 types of crayfish and how to brew beer. However, he went around showing off his culinary skills. I saw that he was stubborn and difficult to teach, so I chased him out of my sect and ordered him not to mention my sect to anyone. So many years have passed in the blink of an eye," Meg lamented. "But I feel like he's older than you." Angela looked at Meg with uncertainty. If culinary skills are related to age, wouldn't everyone in the giant dragon tribe be a chef? Meg asked. "No. I mean, young man. He's growing fast and looks old." Meg coughed dryly. Angela looked at Meg doubtfully. She felt that something was wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. "Speaking of which, I haven't heard from him for many years. I wonder how he is now. Are you still selling prawns?" Meg asked, looking like a caring teacher. "I was about to ask you the same thing." Angela rolled her eyes and shook her head. "His restaurant on Carapace Island was overthrown, and he's gone missing. Alas, it looks like we won't have the chance to see each other again." Meg sighed sadly. Could he really be Boss Hades' master? Angela looked at Meg, who looked a little dejected, and started to accept this strange setting. She even felt that she had mentioned something she shouldn't have, which made Meg a little dejected. She shrugged, and said, "Sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned this person." "It's all right. If you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten that I had a disciple. Let bygones be bygones. I'll still have a disciple." Meg regained his sunny smile, and waved his hand nonchalantly. Angela's eyes widened, and she didn't know how to react. "Do you have any plans after coming to Chaos City? Do you have any expectations for this job?" Meg changed the topic, and asked Angela curiously. Back then, she suddenly left Carapace Island, and took all the succubi with her. He wondered if she had designs on the succubi in Chaos City. "I think Chaos City is a very interesting and special city, so I plan to live here for a while." Angela nodded. After pondering for a while, she said, "As for the job, it will last for at least a year." That's pretty good." Meg nodded. He didn't want to hire another employee who was on a one-day trip. After getting Angela's promise, he stood up and said, "Suit yourself. I'm going to take an afternoon nap." "That's it." Angela stood up. She was still in a daze. "You're a qualified interviewee. You met me, who is thirsty for talents, so things naturally became simple," Meg said with a smile, and turned to go upstairs. "Something doesn't seem right, but there doesn't seem to be anything wrong." Angela sat back down in her seat, and took a sip of warm water to calm herself down. From today onwards, she had a boss too. Before entering the bedroom, Meg went to the study to take a look at Hannah, who was still seriously drawing. Hannah's messy and greasy hair was tied up casually with a pencil. She had a pair of slippers on her feet, and a deformed pencil in her mouth as she pondered seriously. Meg suddenly felt a little guilty for turning a top brewer into a top-notch drawing dog. She was supposed to have such a bright and beautiful youth. Why did she have to learn how to draw? Hannah, who heard the sound, looked up and saw Meg standing at the door. Her eyes lit up, and she waved at him. "Boss, come over for a while. Can you help me see if there are any problems with this drawing?" Meg walked over and solved Hannah's problem simply. He also pointed out a few obvious mistakes in the design for her, and then left suavely under Hannah's admiring gaze. "That's great. Boss has solved the problem that I couldn't figure out for the past 2 days. Now, I only need to complete the overall planning, and then I can start to try to build the prototype." Hannah took a sip of the goji berries in the thermos cup beside her, and once again immersed herself in her work with great enthusiasm. In the evening, Mia and the others came to the restaurant one after another. When they saw Angela sitting in the restaurant, they all looked a little surprised. "Let me introduce everyone. This is Angela, the restaurant's new employee." Meg stood up and introduced. "Hello everyone, I'm Angela. I'll be working in the restaurant from today onwards. I hope everyone can take care of me." Angela looked at everyone with a smile. Her eyes gradually lit up as she glanced at the girls present. "Oh my God, what kind of restaurant is this? The waitresses are all so beautiful." She was too concerned about the crayfish before that she didn't notice this. Why does this coquettish succubus exude a familiar aura? Could it be that she is also? Camilla looked at Angela, and her eyes narrowed slightly. There was a hint of unusualness in her eyes. Angela's gaze fell on Camilla as if she sensed something. She also revealed a hint of doubt. The other party seemed to be a vampire demon. She was elegant and beautiful, but the aura she exuded was completely different from the other waitresses. Is this the same kind of feeling? No pop-up window. Chapter 1620. Yo, did you hire a little succubus? Interesting. Right at this moment, a voice with a hint of laughter sounded. A faint golden light flashed, and Irina appeared in the restaurant. Her long silver dress fell slowly, and her long silver hair was casually draped behind her back. Her skin was fairer than snow, and her features were as exquisite as a painting. There was a small golden moon mark in between her brows, and a faint golden glow enveloped her. Her small pointy ears were so white and thin that they seemed to be able to pass through light. So beautiful. Angela looked at Irina, who had suddenly appeared, and was a little dazed. She looked exactly the same as the lady boss that she had seen on Carapace Island back then, and couldn't forget about her. This fellow indeed has an ulterior motive. Meg looked at the dazed Angela, and pursed his lips. He actually took a fancy to his wife. This was intolerable. "Do I look good?" Irina asked with a smile as she looked at Angela, who was a little dazed. "Yes." Angela nodded. She suddenly came back to her senses, and her face flushed red instantly. Irina smiled at Angela, and said, "I am Irina, Amy's special guest. I am also the only guest who doesn't have to line up to eat." Irina. Angela's eyes widened as she looked at Irina in disbelief. Isn't this the legendary elf princess? Although she had been staying on the small island, she had heard of Irina's rumors. She didn't expect to meet her here. "Father, I'm back." Someone knocked on the door, and Amy's voice came out. Mia went over to open the door. Ugly Duckling, who was sleeping on the counter, suddenly stood up, slid down the edge of the counter, and ran towards the door. It jumped into Amy's arms, and rubbed its head against her chin. "Ugly Duckling, did you secretly eat something again? I feel like you've gotten fatter again," Amy said with disdain as she pinched Ugly Duckling's chubby face. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling looked at Amy aggrievedly and stuck out its tongue, trying to prove that it didn't. "Hey." Amy's gaze landed on Angela, and she said in surprise, "Isn't this big sister Angela?" Angela looked at Amy. "It's that cute half-elf girl again. But why does she know my name?" "Yes. From today onwards, she will be a member of our restaurant," Mag said with a smile. Little Amy, let me introduce myself. Hello, I'm Remi. You can call me Xiao Mi. Remi said with a smile. Hello, Xiao Mi. Angela was a little confused by the father and daughter's actions, but she still nodded. So. Of course, you. Of course. Of. Yes. Angela nodded. Although she felt that she could easily adapt to such a simple job, she didn't refute Meg's words. She decided to be more obedient on the first day. Everyone got to know each other briefly, and then started the busy preparation work before the opening. Meg called Amy to the side and told her to keep Xiao Ari's secret. Then, he started to get busy too. Angela didn't have anything to do. She saw Amy, who was squatting beside a pillar, training the cat. She walked over and asked with a smile, Amy, what are you doing? I'm teaching Ugly Duckling how to climb a tree. It's too fat. It needs to climb a tree, Amy said seriously. She pointed at the dried fish and Ugly Duckling hanging on the pillar, and said, Ugly Duckling, if you climb up, that dried fish will be yours. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling looked at the dried fish and licked its mouth. It stretched its limbs and climbed up the pillar. However, it had only climbed up about half a meter before it slid down while hugging the pillar. Continue, Amy said coldly as she stood at the side with her arms crossed. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling called out, and once again hugged the pillar and climbed up. This time, it climbed up another half a meter. However, it soon slid down while hugging the pillar weakly. It was still a long way from the dried fish that was more than 2 meters tall. Meow, meow tilde Ugly Duckling turned its head to look at Amy and called out aggrievedly. Continue. Amy was unmoved. Angela watched the round fat cat jump onto the pillar again and again. It climbed up with all its might, trying to get close to the roasted dried fish. However, no matter how hard it tried, the closest it got to the dried fish was still half a meter away. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling slid down from the pillar again and lay on the ground weakly, revealing its fat belly. Its fat face was full of despair. Who am I? Why am I here? Amy put the dried fish down from the pillar, threw it into her mouth, and chewed on it. She nodded at Ugly Duckling, and said, you've improved a little today. Let's continue tomorrow. Ugly Duckling looked at this scene with wide eyes. Its head tilted, and it passed away on the spot. All right, stop pretending to be dead. I'll prepare a vegetarian diet set for you later. Amy poked Ugly Duckling's stomach with the tip of her foot. Meow. Ugly Duckling turned around and ignored Amy. My baby is emotional. Since that's the case, let's not eat tonight. Amy shrugged nonchalantly. Meow, meow, meow tilde Ugly Duckling got up from the ground and hugged Amy's calf. Angela watched this scene from the side with a motherly smile. What an adorable little fellow. I'm about to melt. Amy picked Ugly Duckling up in her arms and asked Angela, Big Sister Angela, are you looking for me? Nothing. I'm just bored. Angela shook her head. Then, she curiously asked, but, how does Amy know my name? I don't think we've met before this afternoon, right? Amy tilted her head and thought for a while. Maybe, we've met in a dream. I thought of it when I saw Big Sister Angela. This. Angela was stunned. Although she felt this reason was a little far-fetched, it seemed to be quite convincing coming from Amy. A cute girl like her was always right? Then, what about Big Sister Angela? Why did you come to the restaurant to be a waitress? Amy asked curiously. Angela looked embarrassed. Her initial purpose was naturally to understand the relationship between Amy's and IE restaurant. She didn't expect to find out so soon after she joined. Now, she sighed. Because I got a disease called poverty. It's okay. This disease is usually incurable, Amy consoled her. All right, we've successfully queued up. Now, we just have to wait for the restaurant to open. Vanessa held Sean's hand and stood at the back of the line. She stood on her tiptoes to look ahead, and confirmed that they could get a turn from where they were standing. No pop-up window. Chapter 1621. Do you have to line up like this every time you eat? Sean, who had changed into a black suit, frowned as he looked at the line of nearly 100 people. He then turned to Vanessa with an incredulous expression. Yeah, it's super fun to line up outside Amy's. Look at the 4 long lines in front of the restaurant. The 2 lines on the left are for the normal restaurant, and the 2 lines on the right are for the hot pot. The 2 lines on the left are the savory ones, and the sweet ones are the savory ones. The ones on the right are the sweet ones, and the ones on the left are the sweet ones. That's the line we're in right now. Vanessa nodded with a smile on her face. H, you're forcing ignorant newbies to join the sweet ones. The savory ones are the righteous ones. Abraham harumphed. That's not it. The sweet ones are the right way to eat tofu pudding. The savory ones are the avilders. Vanessa was indignant. Sweet ones. Savory ones. Sean was a little perplexed. Why were there different parties when it came to eating? Oh, I forgot to explain to you. The salty and sweet parties came about because of a bowl of tofu pudding. The tofu pudding with sugar is the sweet party, while the tofu pudding with pickled vegetables and sauce is the salty party. I think brother will like it sweet, right? Vanessa blinked as she looked at Sean. Her face was saying, hurry up and nod your head. All right, then I'll eat something sweet. Sean nodded with a smile. He looked at his impatient little sister, who had never shown much interest in anything. It was as if she had become a completely different person during this time. Acting coquettishly. You're cheating. Abraham sighed as he looked at the smug Vanessa with a smile in his eyes. How did it go, big brother? Vanessa asked as she looked at Sean with a curious expression. They had just met at the entrance of the restaurant, and she had hurriedly dragged them to the back of the line. Yeah, it's pretty much done. We're going back tomorrow. Sean nodded with a smile. Then, do you have to take me back? Vanessa's expression immediately became a little dejected. Yes. You've been away from home for so long, so it's about time you went home. Sean nodded with a firm expression. But, I was ordered to come here. If I can't bring you back, his father won't be happy, Sean said as he looked into Vanessa's eyes. Vanessa looked at Sean. It was no secret that her eldest brother and second brother were vying for the position of crown prince, and the decision was in her father's hands. She would feel bad if her father thought badly of him because of her. After hesitating for a while, she snorted and said, Brother Sean is a bad guy. From which a hint of tenderness appeared in Sean's eyes upon seeing that Vanessa didn't reject his offer. He patted her head with a smile, and said, I'll take you out for some good food when we get back to Rodu. The most delicious restaurant in the world is right here, but I have to go so far away from it in search of delicious food. It's tragic. Vanessa sighed with a hint of melancholy. Is Miss Windsor leaving? Randy, who was not far away, asked. Millimeter, I'm going home. Vanessa turned to look at Randy and nodded helplessly. Sean also turned to look at Randy, and scanned him from head to toe with his sharp gaze. His eyes narrowed slightly, and the powerful aura that he had gained from his military experience naturally emanated. Randy felt a little uncomfortable being stared at by Sean, who was emitting an inexplicable sense of hostility. This man who was like a sharp spear had eyebrows that resembled Vanessa. He should be her brother. He grinned at him, and then looked at Vanessa with a regretful expression, and said, if that's the case, I've lost a friend who can eat the insanely spicy hot pot with me. It's all right, Randy. We can still eat clear soup hot pot. Abraham looked at Randy with a smile. Clear soup is so good. It's good for health. Forget it. Clear soup is so boring. Randy shook his head with interest. However, his eyes soon lit up, and he said, I just heard from the people in front that Mr. Mac is going to launch another exciting new product today. Really? Vanessa, who was still a little sad, was suddenly energized. She looked at Randy with glowing eyes, and said, didn't they just launch the new product a few days ago? Mr. Mac is already so prolific. Exactly. Any dish from Mammoth would be the signature dish of any other restaurant. However, he's launching a new dish every 3 to 5 days. This fellow is simply a monster in human form. Randy nodded in agreement. As a man who had been wandering around the Norland continent with a gluttonous sense for food, he stopped in Chaos City mainly because of Mammoth. To be honest, the efficiency of him searching for a decent delicacy was even lower than Boss Mag's efficiency of creating a new delicacy. Look, is this something that ordinary people can do? What's the new product? Vanessa asked. If she was going home tomorrow, it would be a good farewell if she could eat Mr. Mac's new product today. This is really very exciting. Are you sure you want to hear it? Randy asked with a strange expression. Of course. I'm going to order it later. How can I miss out on Mr. Mac's new product? Vanessa nodded with certainty. The customers who were in a hurry to line up and didn't have time to see the announcement on the little blackboard also pricked up their ears. They were all curious about the new product that Mr. Mac was going to launch today. How could it be worthy of the word exciting? Randy cleared his throat, and then said, Mr. Mac's epic new product today is roasted pig's eyes. There was a sudden silence, and then a commotion. Roasted ear pig's eyes. Vanessa's eyes widened, and the image of eyes being placed on a grill appeared in her mind. She suddenly felt her stomach churning, and felt uncomfortable. Many customers around had similar reactions. They felt uncomfortable just by hearing the name of the dish. Roasted pig's eyes. Sean frowned. The name of the dish sounded strange. He didn't expect that someone would cook pig's eyes as a separate dish. Mr. Mac. You're finally going down the dark path. Not bad, I like it. Abraham chuckled, showing some anticipation. Roasted pig's eyes. Vanessa's gaze landed on Sean, and a sly look appeared in her eyes. She then put on a sad expression and looked at Sean. Brother, I'm going back tomorrow. Will you agree to any request I have today? Sean looked at Vanessa, smiled, and nodded. Yes, as long as it's within my ability. Vanessa's eyes lit up, and she smiled. Okay, you said it. You can't go back on your words. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.